All right, we're live.
We are live.
Welcome back to Ranked, everybody. I'm Charles.
I'm McCurdy.
And I'm Jeffrey.
That's Jeffrey. McCurdy, who is Jeff?
Jeff is one of our good friends. Charlie and I, for those who have been watching the show and keeping up, Charlie and I have been good friends all the way back to when we were in junior high. Jeff, I don't remember if we met in junior high or high school.
You and I rode the bus together.
You
and I rode the bus together in middle school.
We did.
You guys rode the bus together and you don't remember?
Yeah, we did. I forgot. Oh no.
We're just a whole bunch of middle-aged nerds with nothing better to do than to talk about not just Bond movies as usual, but tonight we're going to take a little Bond break because I don't know if anybody watched what we did on Sunday, was it? But we're a third of the way through Bond, so we're just doing a little hiatus while everybody's everybody's lives are in shambles. Patterson lost his cat and then found his cat and then possibly re-lost his cat. So that guy's like gone. He might as well be on another planet. And then the rest of us are just like, I don't know, just dealing with things. So we're just going to do some have some fun live streaming for a bit before we jump in. And maybe we'll do the same thing. Maybe we'll do like another third of Bond because it's like a marathon to do those in general.
25 films total.
25 films.
24 available, and so
24
we're literally
available, and then
away.
2 maybe extra movies in there.
By the time we're done, we'll like probably just be hitting 25. So who knows if maybe we'll do like a live stream of that. But
I hear that too.
Feedback going on.
Yeah, no, I heard that too. We're all good.
The power of live.
Yeah,
power of live.
Fight through the storm. Anyway, tonight what we are doing is we're gonna do a little Zack Snyder's Justice League versus the original, and have them battle it out for supremacy. We're end of the night we'll either land on this or we'll land on this. So here let's flip the background. There we go.
Ooh.
All right.
Ooh.
So I guess we'll just roll right into it with like, I just watched these for I just watched the Snyder Cut last night for the first time. I saw Justice League in theaters, and I walked out feeling like nothing. Like I just felt nothing. I was like, okay, like, and it, not that I immediately forgot it, but it was just like whatever, Wow, I hope that audio is not recording.
No kidding.
Oh,
what could that be?
Okay. I don't know. It's the gremlins, it's the parademons.
Yeah.
The parademons.
Ooh, hot mic. Ooh.
Hot.
Anyway,
no, I was saying.
Go ahead. Let me crack this beer.
I saw it theatrically, the first one in theaters, like the weekend it came out, because I'm a big, like, just comic book nerd in general. That's why as I have the Avengers poster like right behind me.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
You must be a Marvel shill then.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm both,
we know you're biased, sir.
So like I saw Justice League in theaters. I really wanted to because I like the big team up movies. And then when I heard that the Zack Snyder one coming out, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm gonna watch it. It's probably still gonna be bad, but I'm still gonna watch it.
Yeah.
And I saw it like the Saturday it was out on HBO Max. Like I sat down, watched the 4 hours. Like I made sure I made a whole like day of it to make sure I had time to like watch it and focus on it, not just a background thing.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have watched it twice. Like that's what I do with Bond. I watch those movies at least twice, if not more. I don't feel generally my there's always going to be this big battle between Marvel and DC. And I'm the guy who I'm always going to be in the guy in the room that goes, that's bullshit. Because there's a huge, most people want to like something more than they legitimately like it, and they will force it because they just can't, like, especially when like another DC movie, DCEU or whatever came out with Suicide Squad. People refused. It's like they left in shock. They were like, yeah, it was great, because the trailer was like, this movie's going to be the greatest thing ever.
That's all it was
and
the trailer.
Then when people walk out, they're like, the reality is that movie was terrible. And then it's like they walk out like, no, like in denial, like, no, it was great. Wasn't it, guys? Wasn't it great? And you're like, no, it wasn't. Like, search your feelings, you know it to be true. And they're like, no, but it had the Joker, but it had pop music in it. No, like, and they freak out, you know.
Of all the DCEU movies, or at least all DC movies, I'll just throw out there all DC movies. I think Suicide Squad's the one where I have no wanting to ever watch again.
Yeah.
I've seen all the others many times. I've watched Batman vs Superman many times. I've watched Man of Steel many times. I watched even the theatrical cut of Justice League. I think I've watched it at least 3 times since it came out of theaters.
But here's the thing.
Suicide Squad, I don't care. I don't want to.
Which I agree. But my whole point now is that with this, you know, everybody's like, release a Snyder cut. Do it. And I just thought, there's no way. There's no way they would ever do it, because there's a string of movies that have all been Frankensteined by the studio. And for them to release one is to admit that that's possible. So now it's like, are they going to see that this is potentially profitable? And now we're going to see all these other movies that they're going to start shooting out Snyder cuts left and right, you know,
or
because
any
this
cut.
one worked.
So now it's, any time there's a bad movie in theaters, people are going to say, well, that wasn't the true vision. We want to see the true vision that director had for this movie.
So let's back the way back. So how did we get here? Right? How did we get here? Let's turn the clock back.
It's the McCurdy history.
We're gonna do it live, and maybe this time I won't start cussing randomly. So how did we get here? Let's go all the way back, though. Let's remember why we're here, right?
Zack Snyder is born.
Before Zack Snyder is born, before Zack Snyder is directing these movies, though, we have to remember 2012, we had the last of Christopher Nolan's Batman Dark Knight trilogy, which, if you guys remember, like, those were, at the time, the best superhero movies around. Like, we had no Avengers. We had Iron Man. And I think Captain America was just starting out, right? This was circa 2012-ish, right? I mean, I even remember 2008 and reading in comments something about someone saying, oh, man, Marvel's going to be doing this really big thing, and people are making a big stink about, you know, the Dark Knight. But you better watch out. Like, this, you know, this Avengers thing is going to be huge. And then around 2012, of course, Avengers comes out, and it's the biggest movie ever, right? At the time. And people, you know, studios start taking notice. They're like, oh, we should start doing this in making these movies.
The way it all started was, remember, it started with Iron Man. I remember at the time being like, that's how far we've come, that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel to make Iron Man, you know. And
but that's
now I'm like, you idiot, you know. But at the time, I was like, God, they're running out of superheroes.
Well, that's a whole other story.
Little did I know that was just the seed, you know, planting the whole, like, this massive bubble that we have.
I could go down that whole Avengers avenue, why they did Iron Man, all that stuff. That's a whole other.
Like, Tony show, like, the fact that, like, Robert Downey Jr. shows up at the end of Incredible Hulk, you're like, wait, what? They're connected.
Yeah.
But that's
which first time I saw it, I was like, as a kid, I always wanted that to be the case. Oh, now they're actually doing it. Good for them. And then the fact that it worked was fantastic, until everybody and their mom started to try to replicate that success.
Because, like, any business, any business, you're going to see what's trending, what's the big trend. And so it was this. But before that all happened, right in between that time period, Christopher Nolan and David Goyer, who wrote the Dark Knight movies, they came up with a pitch or an idea for a Superman movie that would have been like a modern take. It's like, we've championed Batman enough. Like, we haven't done Superman justice in several years. The last Superman movie at this point was 2006 Superman Returns. That was Bryan Singer's Superman, which was supposed to be kind of like a quasi Superman 3-ish thing. So from the Christopher Reeves movies. So they were like, let's pay our attention to Superman. And so they come up with this story for what ends up becoming Man of Steel. And at that moment, they're like, well, who are we gonna pick to direct these movies? And it kind of makes sense why they did, because who's directed 2 comic book movies under Warner Brothers that isn't Christopher Nolan that were successful? Zack Snyder. He directed 300, and then he also directed Watchmen, which was, it was a modest hit. I mean, I don't know if it really did well, but there was enough fan base there that people. Yeah, we love Watchmen.
It was definitely like a visual style too. He was very stylistic with this stuff, very distinct. Zack
and
Snyder
we'll
style.
talk about. I mean, we're gonna get into. Charlie's got all the notes and things. We'll talk about Zack Snyder, but essentially, what's happening? Oh, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. But basically, Zack Snyder, they pick Zack Snyder, which kind of makes sense. And then Man of Steel comes out, and it's kind of like people are like, yeah. And
at the time, it was like, wait. The guy who made 300 and Watchmen, the guy that I love, the guy who, as far back as Dawn of the Dead, 2004, that guy, Mr. Slow-Mo, is gonna team up with Chris Nolan, who made The Dark Knight and all that. How could they fail? How did they fail? This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. But then
and this is 2000 whatever, Charlie. This isn't like now the wool has been off my eyes, Charlie Myers, right?
This was like it's the same thing as when you go, wait. They're gonna make the guy who made Bridesmaids is gonna team up with all the chicks who were in Bridesmaids to finally make a new Ghostbusters. How could this be bad? And then then you see it, and you're like,
oh, right, yeah.
But what it came down to in both instances, what it came down to was it wasn't just them performing those roles that they had. Like Zack Snyder is as his career goes on, he's becoming more and more like Michael Bay, where he is fantastic at crafting these beautiful images, and whether you like slow-mo or not, like what he visualizes is fantastic. Where he fails, though, the reason why this failed in my view is that he didn't just take this story that somebody else formulated, like 300. It's like here like literally the storyboard's already taken care of. Just pick up Frank Miller's book and just like boom, your storyboard is set. With this, now he's like delving into crafting the story itself, and it's not like this
that's not entirely true,
just,
but
like start manufacturing. It's and that's why I equate him to Michael Bay, because they're both like they should both be DPs. Like they're absolutely phenomenal at crafting this action. But then when it comes down to the little things, that's where he needed Chris Nolan to come in and be like, tag me in, bro. And then Chris Nolan directs those scenes that actually require subtlety. Zack Snyder has no fucking subtlety.
He's not
whatsoever.
subtle at all. No,
at all.
It's shades of prequels, George Lucas.
And it
really
worked
cool
for Watchmen, because Watchmen. Sorry, I'm jumping on you, Jeff. Because Watchmen is supposed to be. It's meant to be over the top and something of like a caricature of superhero stories. So that tone worked for that movie. But then when he goes to make a legitimate, like, you're supposed to take me super seriously, especially because we have this dark, stark, and depressing tone movie, then so much of it is over the top and like borderline campy and awkward. Like there's so much more Victor Stone in the Snyder cut, which is like good on one hand but bad on the other. Meeting his mom, for example, was, first off, I immediately was like, well, this woman sucks. Like the principal is saying, look, your son hacked into our system and changed his friend's grades. And she's like, what? Well, she wasn't going to get good grades anyway. And the principal's like, wow, you're right. Like, no. That's a horrible thing to do, to just hack into the school and change grades. Like you're a horrible mom. Like if I was the principal, I'd be like, you're an awful mother. But instead she just justifies it with that BS. And then fast forward to the game. I'm almost to my point. That was just I'm getting sidetracked by my ire.
Your point. You're getting sidetracked by your point. Yeah.
But my main point is, so like again, Zack Snyder, slow-mo, love it or hate it, whatever. It's there for him though. It's like he has this sociopathic Michael Bay approach to things, which is like, what's dramatic? slow motion and music and people overacting. That's somehow that equals drama. And so what you get is like Victor Stone scores that touchdown in the flashback that sets up his whole story. And it's just a touchdown, but for some reason it's like, okay, mom, cry your eyes out. And she's like, this is my boy. That's my boy. And then it's like, dad's out there. Dad's not there. Like everything is just like cranked up to where I just go, God, there's no subtlety here. So there's just nothing, there's nothing human about this at all. But it's supposedly all supposed to congeal and mix together into something effective. And that's where like Chris Nolan should come in and be like, can we do a take where we just cut all of that in half, just like a little bit, so it's a little more human, you know? But no, mom, you have to cry your eyes out and freak out because that equals drama and people caring and engaging. But me, I just
hold on that empty.
Like, oh no,
we got to hold on that empty chair forever. Just really shove your face that there's an empty chair there. Like, oh,
and then cut to Victor Stone and hold on his face forever as he's like this. And it's like, no. Just have him look disappointed and then go back to enjoying himself like a human being would, as opposed to he's just like, mom won't stop crying and he won't stop staring at the empty chair. And so it's just ham fisting like daddy issues. That's the type of stuff where I go, oh, they made a really good call bringing this guy in, but he needed help in the like not being a sociopath department to make it work, because it just feels like Watchmen. It feels like a caricature rather than like a legitimate, Dark Knight style movie.
So there's two major criticisms, like mainly after Batman v Superman came out about Zack Snyder, that I think kind of cover two of the things that you talked about, right? So one of them, there's a video essays on YouTube called Nerd Writer, and he did a whole bit about how one of Snyder's problems, one of two, is that he loves to do moments but not scenes, right? So when you're talking about all the slow-mo that is in this movie, in the Snyder cut specifically, that is kind of cut out of the Whedon cut, he really, really milks all those scenes. Now, those scenes, I think, are great for what Snyder should be doing more of, is commercial work. Like if you're doing a commercial or a music video, that stuff works really well. It's really visually. That's how he started, right?
Yeah.
That stuff really works really well. But like that's the part of the problem, is Snyder can't seem to do small scenes like you're saying. It's that is something that you can tell that he is not that great with doing and making it effective. The second big one that a lot of people started noticing, Zack Snyder is a huge fan of Ayn Rand and objectivist philosophy. And it kind of creeps itself into Batman v Superman a lot. It creeps itself into this movie and in the Snyder cut specifically in certain ways. And like that is just to say simply that like instead of the characters doing things for the greater good, right? So Superman, why is Superman Superman? Why does he do, why does he save people? Does he do it for himself? No. He does it because he knows it's the right thing to do, right?
Yep.
Even Batman, to an extent, is the same way. Like, he does have his internal reasoning why it's like, well, my parents were killed, and like, I want to see justice happen where I'm living in a world where justice doesn't happen. Things that Christopher Nolan, like we were talking about, Batman Begins and Dark Knight, set those things up very, very well, and those motivations. Snyder, on the other hand, has this more viewpoint of like, no, it's the system's wrong, and the self should be the one who prevails. And so then you get scenes like with Victor Stone and his mom, where his mom's like trying to tell the man that like the man's wrong, but you're like, in the real world,
no, you're just an asshole. Like,
in the real world,
he even starts a scene where he's like, Mrs. Stone, and she's like, I'm a doctor, thank you. And there, she's a douchebag.
Yeah, but then, and then you have scenes like,
I don't like her.
You have scenes like
when she gets killed by a truck, and I'm like, thanks, truck. Good work.
You have scenes like in Aquaman, when Aquaman is saving that guy. And it's in both scenes, or in both cuts, but Aquaman saves that guy on the boat. And then when he saves him, he like, instead of just saving the guy, like a good superhero would do, like what we are kind of grown up watching movies and cartoons and reading comic books, what we would expect a hero to do.
Him carrying the
carries
guy
him, drops them, is like, hey,
clapping and singing,
you know,
and
But no, what does he do? He goes, grabs a bottle of alcohol and says, it's on this guy that I saved. And it's almost a very like objectivist point of view. It's like, well, I saved your life, so you owe me this alcohol. You know, it's like an eye for an eye type thing, but that doesn't really, that's not what superheroes tend to do. So one of the main
everybody in this movie has mommy daddy issues.
Yeah.
Like, no, every single one has some issue with their parents. That's what he likes going on.
But it's like superheroes have always had that. That's not something new. Sure. It's just, I think the way he focuses it for sure.
I'm gonna cut to Jeff because he's got something to say.
So like I could go on forever about Man of Steel because this movie I like about 85% of that movie because the good parts of Man of Steel is like a lot of times the beginning parts where it's showing what makes Superman a good superhero. It's not that he has all these powers. It's who he was raised by. He had loving parents from Krypton that like gave him birth naturally and sent like they tried to save him because they knew their plan was doomed. And then he's raised by his farm parents who couldn't have kids, but they raised him as their own. And he teaches them like you have these powers. The whole thing like Marvel, you got powers, use them with great responsibility. And so that's why he's raised very morally well. He was raised in a nurturing life his whole life with great parents and learned how to work for himself. He became actually like a reporter trying to seek out the truth and stuff. Whereas because you get Batman the opposite, who's like, I was raised without parents. I had to learn to do everything on my own. I had to make myself stronger to be better. And that part was great. Then you get the rest of Man of Steel where it's all the CGI action mess at the end. And that's a lot of times where Snyder would struggle with is like I feel like his big action scenes would be messy. Like Man of Steel, where it's just things everywhere, throwing around. It's like the Michael Bay thing. You have explosions and cool stuff, but it's so like disoriented. It's hard to follow what the hell is even going on to enjoy it.
There's nothing to care about.
Yeah,
but this is where I think
it's same thing all the time. Where like the big action scene starts, and when there's nothing to
zone out.
That's when I go get a beer. That's when I start to. But then the dramatic scenes come about, and I'm like, ooh, something. Right. You know,
I will say this about Man of Steel, though, to your point, Jeff, is that like I agree and I also disagree. I think one of the problems with that movie is the setup for the quiet moments is a very like people have noticed how jarring that is because in what you're describing to me, that sounds like the Christopher Reeve Superman, where he's, there's certain elements very specific. And this is the big one that a lot of people didn't like was that in the original Superman movie, his father dies of a heart attack.
Yep. Something
to teach him the responsibility that like you can't save everybody in the world, Clark. But what the movie does, and because Zack Snyder wants to be like big and turn everything up to 11, how does he kill? How does he kill his father? He kills him by having him go into a tornado, and his father doesn't want Superman to save him because he's worried. He wants to save his son, but it's like
he could have saved him. Without having to give away his powers.
Why can't he just be a heart attack? Like a heart attack is so much more
human.
He has superhuman speed. He could have just pulled and
exactly.
That's where it's like I get that, and that's watching this Snyder cut. I'm like, I get what you're trying to do. I understand the attempt. Now, did it work? Not at all. And because generally it's like it's ham-fisting things. Let me throw out a strong example of saying too much, and not being subtle. You have the intro Wonder Woman scene in this cut is significantly elongated, which is fine. It's like our fun little. It almost looks like a heist, and then it turns out that it's like it's the suicide bombing attempt, and the only difference between the two versions is like it's just the prolonged action. There isn't really that much more that you get from the longer one. But
I'd say the tone's different.
They saved a little moment there at the end where she's like, "It's okay, everybody. It's okay, everybody. Let's leave. Everything's happy."
She looks a little girl. She's like, "You can be whatever you want to be."
Yeah, and she's like, the little girl's like, she's like, "Are you okay, princess?" And she says, "Can I be you one day?" And that's where it's like you had me until that moment. You don't. You
murderer.
Human beings don't talk like that. The little girl wouldn't say that. The little girl, like you're supposed to get from that scene that all those little girls are inspired.
Yeah.
The fact that they that's just like, hey, Zach, your politics are showing, right? Like, we really want to show that we want to inspire little girls to be more like Wonder Woman. Okay, then don't put your words in the mouth of a 6-year-old. I mean, you see it in movies all the time where the hero does, male or female, boy or girl, who cares? They do something inspiring, and it's like that kid is forever affected by that. You know, like Marvel does it all the time. Well, everybody does it all the time. This is like, okay, like, I got it. I got the message. Thank you. It's so, there's no subtlety to his craft, and it drives me nuts. Like, it makes me hate it. And so let's just turn this over to the point of the night. We're either looking at, let's jump back to this wonderful Photoshop job. We're either going to land on, where'd it go? We're either going to land on this, or we're going to land on that. We're either going to land on that,
or we're going to land on that.
Or that. And honestly, this right here, you know, like saying the Snyder Cut's better, I'm sure 90% of people would say that, because the original Justice League is just like a rushed mess and a Frankenstein's monster. But at the same time, Joss Whedon came in and made some good changes. And while like one of those changes includes our embarrassing mustache thing, which the movie literally opens with, which I remember the first time I saw that, I was just like,
oh yeah,
what is happening? You know, and it was
that controversy right in your face.
It's hilarious. I mean, and it just, it speaks volumes as to what was going on behind the scenes, where one of their, like, literally Superman refused to shave his face because he's like, I'm out of here. Like, and
well, it wasn't that wasn't what it was.
Impossible Fallout is better for that mustache. Like, I'm glad he stuck to his guns, but
it wasn't him. It was the studio's like, you cannot cut the mustache because we still need to film with him, and then he's going to have to grow the mustache. It's going to delay us, so you cannot do that. That's what happened
for this one movie. It was like, we need this mustache. This is like $1 million mustache.
It's the mustache that it's the mustache that cost Warner Brothers a lot of money.
Yeah. So anyway, so like, I'm tempted to do this. Like, I'm tempted to say that the original cut is better. I like, but all in all, I think I just like, here's what it comes down to me. When I walked out of Justice League, like I said, I walked out of the theater and I was like, okay. When I walked out of Batman v Superman, I was just like I passionately hated it. I loved to hate it because there's so much stupidity inherent in it. And it was in the comics, or no. There's so much dumb shit. There's so many, like, just play-by-plays of like, wait, why did Lois throw the thing in the water, but then she went right back to get, like, there's just all this dumb stuff that wasn't thought out, because Zack Snyder's whole philosophy of filmmaking is, it was cool. There's nothing deeper than, it looked cool, it was badass, you know, and that's it. And that's fine for 300 because somebody else came up with the story. That's fine for Watchmen because somebody else came up with the story, and he just has to visualize it, and then you just pray to God that he gets good he casts well and gets a good performance. But when you have this Frankenstein monster, and then you come in, it's like, this was the original vision. The original vision has all those moments from Batman v Superman that made me passionately hate it, whereas this one didn't have all those. In fact, I left like I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I just feel nothing for it. I might passionately hate this fucking thing just like Batman v Superman. I'm going to cut to McCurdy for his reaction. How do I get rid of this?
What? So how I feel about it is slightly different, but I will say when I saw Batman v Superman, I left the theater like, because at the time I was much more like, I want these movies to succeed because I really do like the DC movies. Like, I actually am legitimately, I love the DC stuff. Not saying that I love Zack Snyder's vision. I get so annoyed when I hear people say things like, oh, it's a DC movie, that means it's dark. I'm like, no, that is the producer answer. That is this is the cake on top answer. That's like, that's not That's not what it is. The thing is, you have a guy named Zack Snyder who's been making the dark movies that have. That's what it gets tagged as.
Well, that's
is
a
these dark
generational thing
movies
for sure. Like,
It's
generationally speaking, we all missed the Superman of the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
or whatever, you know.
But
And then we got
everybody's
Batman
thing
of
was
the
like,
90s.
yeah, but everybody's thing
now-
was like the DC movies are dark, and I'm like, okay, you guys, you're specifically talking about Batman, which
Yep.
Batman in itself is a good dark character. It works really great. You have the DC movies that Zack Snyder's made, like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Justice League. They're dark. They have, again, they're very much Ayn Rand. The characters don't care like you want them to in the stories. Every point that you've made about Zack Snyder's Justice League, I just want to say, yes, that copy paste, I get it. All of that. Great.
Color.
All that shit. But
it's
like
literally
people
dark,
always
too.
say it's dark. And I'm like, that's not, you have tonally dark, and then there's visually dark. Tonally, yes, this movie has a lot of stuff that I'm like, when I watched it the first time, I was like, holy crap.
Well, all right.
This is
Where are you?
violent.
Where
But let
are
me
you?
get back to my point.
Where are
Let
you?
me get back to what I was talking about, though. And that is that, like, even that being said, I left Batman v Superman at first hopeful. Like, I was like, it was fine. But much like you talked about people who watch Suicide Squad, you know, being like, it was great. It weighed on me over time, and I realized, like, it's a terrible, like, Batman v Superman specifically has a lot of problems structurally, as well as all sorts of stuff all over the board.
Yeah.
Snyder doesn't understand why certain comic books made an impact. Like, killing Superman off in Batman v Superman was kind of a misstep. It's like, that was a big
and then
thing.
bringing him back to life, like, by the end, like, they have the little teaser where it's like
they're going to bring him back to life. Like, we know that's going to happen.
Within
But it's
10
like,
minutes, it's like
but
he's
we
dead and then
don't
he's
get-
alive again.
yeah, but we don't get the impact that would have had if we'd had several movies to understand who Superman is and all the stuff that he's done. None of that's
Again,
there.
it's a sociopath at the wheel who's like, this is all emotional, right? Doesn't this emotionally resonate with you?
Yeah.
And you go, no, because you haven't earned it. And that's like the entire Snyder cut is like.
But let me point this out, though. Let me
This
say
is
this,
you,
though.
though, right? You're going to put this at the top. I'm just assuming.
I'm going to put, that's where I'm going to be at. But my reasoning really comes down to this. It's just that when I watch the Whedon cut, and because of the Frankenstein-ness and because of how just chopped up it is and how it just feels like I feel like something doesn't add up. I mean, and one thing that I think Snyder Cut at least does better is, at least the very end of the day, they gave Steppenwolf a little bit better motivation than, I'm going to stop the control of the world. There's a lot. It's like, there are better things about the Snyder Cut. I think, like, I know you're going to steamroll it and be like, no, it's bad and all this stuff. But I'm like, I'm like, Charlie, there are things that definitely,
I think they're
Snyder Cut
both
improved.
pieces of shit. Like,
and here's the thing.
Just to be frank about it.
No, that's, and I think that observation's totally fair and legitimate, because I do see there are problems with both cuts for sure. But I think, honestly, I prefer the one that's like, this is what the intention was. This is what we were going with. It's like the analogy I was trying to come up with was like, you make an action figure for a toy. This is a bad analogy, but I'm going to run with it. You make an action figure for a toy. It's supposed to be a toy for boys or something along those lines, right? Like, it's supposed to be this dark, grim toy that we're going to come out. It's going to be a collector's thing. And then all of a sudden, midstream, they're like, oh, wait, those toys aren't selling. We need to make a happy toy. And so what do? You paint it pink. And you do like throw glitter at it, and you have this monstrosity that you have to look at, and you're like,
Don't you want it? And you go, no.
And as much as
why don't you want it? It's colorful. It has pop music. Those the research says that that's what you like. Don't you want it? And you go, fuck off. No.
No.
But I'm saying
that's where I come back to. Because
you
I
have
think
though
both
is you
movies
have
are not deep enough either. Both movies are not that deep to begin with. They're both like,
but like it's like Joss Whedon came in and was like he's looking at the material and he's going,
I'll give you this with Whedon though. I think
Zack
he definitely
Snyder
had
like
to.
That, well, hang on. Zack Snyder had this dark stuff that like some of it works, but like notice the things that are missing from Whedon's cut. Like notice the things that he took out.
Yeah.
But like, notice what he realized wasn't working, you know, and got rid of. And a lot of it you could say was for the sake of time, obviously, because he got to cut this movie in half. But otherwise, there are all these things that, like, again, Zack Snyder's like, isn't this deep and emotional? And it's like, no, Whedon comes in, he's like, this doesn't feel like, you know, to your toy analogy, it's like, you know, they try to come up with some toy that like will strike you emotionally or whatever, and it's like, all the research shows that this is what it does. No, I just don't want I don't want anything to do with like the dark version or the Frankenstein version. Neither of them work for me. That's overall when it comes to these two cuts. Neither of them work for me, and I almost want to opt for the one that gives me the least pain. Like, straight up, that's why I'm tempted to just be like,
in sooner.
I kind of like the original cut more.
I'll level you with this and say that, like, there's a part of me though, and I think you may feel this way, maybe you don't feel this way, but as somebody who like has worked in the film industry or made movies or has that kind of interest, when I watched this cut, I had other friends who'd watch it and they'd say things about like, oh, I don't like superhero movies normally. I didn't like the Wonder Woman stuff. For me, it wasn't that. I think maybe my interest returned to, what did they do different? Like, that was the question I'm asking my head the entire time as I'm watching this movie. So I'm saying that, like, there's a possibility as I'm watching the other cut, which I've seen twice now, where I'm like, what did they do different between the two cuts? Because I'm actually like, that's what's interesting me more in the Snyder cut. But I do think one of the other problems with the Snyder cut we haven't really touched on is the Snyder cut is like this could have been, like, every time you watch it, as you're watching it, you're like, it could have been this. And when I say that, I'm saying that in regards to, I'm going to pull this up real quick, because originally the intention, the idea was we had Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, terrible title. You and I've talked about it. Suicide Squad. And then Wonder Woman would have came out in 2017. The original intent was Justice League Part 1 was going to come out in November of 2017, which it did. And then they were going to have The Flash, which was going to be its own movie, which that movie has been in development hell since its inception. Then we had Aquaman, which we did get, and we got Shazam, which we did get, which were both not directed by Zack Snyder, and I would argue are much better movies. Yes. And then we were supposed to get a Justice League.
Were they supposed to be from Zack?
No. But I'm just pointing this out so that, yeah. And then we were supposed to get a Justice League Part 2, because I do think as I'm watching this movie and I feel it, like the Whedon version, I'll get to the rest of it, but the Whedon version of this movie, as I'm watching it, it feels like this is a superhero movie. Here you go. Like, I've done a superhero movie. I'd made the best superhero movie. Here you go. So I'm going to rework everything that Zack put together and, put it out there. But when I watch the Snyder Cut, I get feelings of Lord of the Rings more than I do a superhero film. And that's specifically with anything dealing with Atlantis, dealing with the past stuff with the war and all that stuff, anything that has to do with the
I wrote down in my notes, I said I honestly would have appreciated a Lord of the Rings style prologue, right? That just was like all that stuff that at one point Wonder Woman is just like suddenly laying out story hour. I kind of wish that just let Alfred, because Alfred's got that awesome voice. Let Alfred
cut it.
Like amazing history, right? And that would like, and I also thought, so switching over to the original cut, that the original cut of Justice League is so all over the place that it reminds me of how I bought like one of those iTunes packages of like all the Justice League animated and then some. Like, it's like 20, 30 movies of animated DC stuff. Yeah. And just jump into any one of them, and it's just like it's not like something that you got to start at the beginning and watch continuously. It just like drops you in the middle of all these characters. And it's like, oh, I know who all of them are.
These are made. Those are specifically made for the fans. But but I will say,
it also just works. It doesn't need any setup, because it's like, oh, I know who all these people are.
Like, we don't need to explain Batman's backstory. It's just like, okay, you know who Batman is, you know who Robin is, but the story about this one is specifically Robin get killed. or something along those lines.
My point is that I honestly wish that instead of constantly trying to chase Marvel, they would have just said, okay, screw it. Let's just do our own thing. And just like our first movie is going to be Justice League. Honestly, I think Justice League would have just worked as just like, boom, that's our first movie. No Man of Steel, no lame Batman v Superman that should never have been. I mean, it's so, it just shows how DC needs, like, please, everybody pray that DC can break away from Warner Brothers and just be their own studio like Marvel so they can begin making decisions for what's right. Because Batman v Superman screams of shitty marketing tactics rather than like Marvel. At the same time, Marvel had Civil War coming out. Civil War is such a classier approach than just like Iron Man versus Captain America, which is without class. You're trying to be classy, and you sir are without class.
Yeah. So
I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you about that.
Jump to Jeff again.
Yeah, I'll agree with you about that. Like, you should start with Justice League. So I'm someone who I never read comics as a kid, but I watched the animated stuff very deeply. Like, I watched all Batman animated series. I was really big in the Superman series. I just finished today rewatching all of the Justice League animated series. And
Unlimited. Do you watch Justice League and
Unlimited.
Justice League Unlimited?
Unlimited is where I just ended today.
Okay, cool.
And I love that whole series. And it kind of starts that way up where like Justice League, the series, the only two superheroes before that ever been talked about was Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
Two big ones. After that, everyone else is pretty much like just dropped in like, oh, hi Flash, hi Green Lantern, hi Hawkgirl. And they kind of introduced Wonder Woman and Martian Manhunter, but everyone else is just kind of thrown in, and you get to find out about them as the show goes on.
Went on, yeah.
As they could have done with the movies. They could, like, they kind of did with Batman vs Superman by introducing Aquaman, Flash, and
Marvel's doing one thing. We're going to do the other. Not light versus dark, not funny versus serious, but just like instead of catching, like rushing to catch up with them, hey, our fans are dedicated. Let's just plop them right into the universe.
I don't need to see Martha and Thomas Wayne die again. I've seen it so many times in movies before. We said Nolan so recently, like everyone knows why Batman's the way he is at this point.
I think
these movies too.
I get it, but I get that sentiment. The same with Spider-Man. People are like, I don't need to see Uncle Ben dying again. I think that's I think that's like a generalized fan reaction, and I'm like, yes, but you could do different things with it, and I think we haven't seen that, and that's what frustrates me.
We didn't see in slow-mo. That's the problem.
What I'm saying,
we need to see in slow-mo.
It's one of two things for the two of you. Let me just blow the whistle between the two of you.
Yeah.
You either follow Marvel and you establish that within this new universe, this new DCEU. You kill the Waynes and you do the Krypton. You do everything slowly, or you just cut right to Justice League. You do A or B. What they did was in the middle, which is like kind of half-assed. My whole point is that don't do Man of Steel, don't do Batman v Superman, just cut right to Justice League. And Justice League assembled. Like, screw it. Just
that was so Charlie, that was at one point you love Mad Max, right?
Oh yeah, no,
you love Mad Max, Charlie?
Yeah.
No? Yes. Mad Max. George Miller originally was going to do a Justice League. It got all the way to we have costumes. We're going to start shooting this.
When?
This was okay. So here's the thing. This was like 2007, 2000.
Yeah, mid 2000s.
Oh, that predates all of this. Then
this is all. This is way before this, and this is before George Miller had done all the Mad Max films, but he hadn't made Fury Road, which everyone was like, "Oh my god, like where have you been? Like this is a fantastic film. Like we need more of this, right?" That's before this. And what happened was
I had that reaction when he made Babe. I was like, dude.
No. Babe 2, Pig in the City.
Hey, Babe's a great movie. Don't knock on Babe. Don't throw Babe in the corner.
I would never knock Babe. Anytime I went to nieces and nephews, they're like, we're going to watch Babe. They're like, we want to watch something new. I'm like, we're going to watch Babe.
I love
Thank you.
I love Babe. Babe's great.
What about Lorenzo?
That'll do, Pig. Come on. Hey, that'll do. That'll do. But, so anyway.
I wish they would have said that to
George
Zach.
Miller.
That'll do. That'll do, Zach. Now, fuck off.
So,
correct the scene because you're a cunt. Fuck off, mate. Sorry, go ahead.
Watch the language, buddy.
I wish I had
Watch
the
it.
button.
I wish you did too. I wish you did. So George Miller was originally going to do a Justice League, but the part of the problem was you had Christopher Nolan's Batman, which was doing really well. Like it's still a great movie. Both of them are. At least, people have what they'll say about Dark Knight Rises, whatever. But that trilogy, I think, is pretty solid overall. So that was coming out at the same time, and DC has historically had this weird thing where they don't want to have one hero here, but then do another version here and do another, which they're kind of now going to start breaking with what they're planning to do with these next couple films, because they're kind of at this point, it's like, we made such a mess with this Justice League thing, like, screw it. Like, let's just do whatever we want to do at whatever time. So there was going to be a Justice League Mortal, and it got to the point where they had costumes, they had a cast, they were ready to start filming, like they were ready to go. And then Warner Brothers was like, no, pulled the plug, because we were like, the Batman movies are doing really well. We're going to pull the plug on this. And they didn't. They like
dark.
Yeah.
They want.
Yeah.
They just want a black screen. I wish I would have uploaded a black screen. Just the best I have is this. They just want this. In fact, it's going to be in black and white.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
But after that, it's like, my version of it, if I were like, if someone handed me the keys and could go back in time and said, Ryan, how would you fix this? This is my version. Instead of doing straight to Justice League, because they would have already done Man of Steel. They'd been like, we got this Man of Steel thing. I would have kept the Kryptonian storyline thing that they started, do a Man of Steel 2, Superman 2, because again, we can either do this fast or we can slow down, take our time, build this up. Do a Man of Steel. Don't introduce Batman. Maybe introduce Wonder Woman. Because there's a line in Man of Steel where they like kind of suggest that the Kryptonians started mankind in a weird way. And you're like, why didn't we ever touch on this? This is kind of interesting, but whatever.
They do literally look the exact same.
I know.
So
It's weird. But then they also kind of would explain like why we have superhumans and all this other stuff, which they don't really get into. So I would have done that. Then I've done Ben Affleck's Batman movie as its own separate thing. But in this Batman, we don't kill Martha, but we start this Batman off as where like Robin's dead, and like you can have the Martha,
that's the biggest tragedy
Batman.
Of this whole thing. The fact that the fact that Ben Affleck didn't get his movie is the single greatest tragedy, because he is the best part of these movies.
And that's the thing. Then we would have jumped to, we could have jumped to doing like either call it World's Finest, which is actually in the comics where Batman and Superman team up. You could have established in Superman 2, you could have done Lex Luthor and introduced him and not, cast Jesse Eisenberg, maybe cast, maybe do the fan cast and cast like Bryan Cranston would have been a better choice for a lot of fans. Do something along those lines. Make it a story about how you have this man who was like built from the ground up, and he like, I was a self-made man, and now this guy Superman comes along and is like screwing all my plans, and like screw this guy, and then does that could have been its own story. It would have been great, but instead we got this hodgepodge of this movie where it's like we got to do Superman 2, and we got to introduce Batman, and it's got to set up for later movies. Oh, we also need to bring Wonder Woman in it. And then it's like, gross.
Well, and again, couple all of that with, and just Jesse Eisenberg, all he brings my mind to is just how like all of his dialogue in Batman v Superman. And then even in this movie, even in the brief scene that he's in, he's just like, it's just God, the devil, God, devil, and it's all meant to. It's meant to make you think. I mean, it's accurate, but it's meant to make you think that this thing is like smarter than it is.
Yeah,
and again, in like the hands of Zack Snyder, it's just not.
No,
exactly. It's trying to be like,
Christopher Nolan, but it's not.
Chris Nolan's was so deep and psychological, and yes, it was. All of his movies are deep and psychological. I'll just introduce the elements, like the superficial elements that will try to trick people into thinking that that's the same with my movie.
But
none of it works.
No, but
none of it works. Dark Knight Rises wasn't a superhero movie. It was Christopher Nolan wanted to make a Michael Mann movie with superheroes in it.
Well, that's
totally.
That's what all the Batman. That's what all the Dark Knight movies have been, though. That's like it's a setup to that.
Where are you, Jeff? Where are you?
I'm honestly probably with Charlie. I might put the Whedon cut at 1 over the Snyder
That's unexpected. Cut. That's completely unexpected. That's fascinating.
Here's the thing. I would normally get very passionate and be like,
"You're
wrong."
No.
Here's how I feel about it.
I agree.
It's like
I just want to kill both of them. I just it's
I wish that either happened.
But for me,
Sophie's
it's
choice.
personally...
Pick between your daughters. Just liquidate both of them, please. They're a pain in the ass. I don't want either of them.
Though, it's
I do it myself.
I still lean the Snyder Cut for me.
Yeah.
Like it's just a more epic movie, and it does have a big epic operatic feel to it. But you're not wrong in what you're saying as far as like the tiny moments, like. And the other thing is just what I was trying to get to was that this movie is such a like. It could have been this because you have all these things that are set up for later movies that we're not going to get, or we're going to get some other version of those things. Like all the Aquaman stuff set up does not fit the Aquaman movie that we got. Nope. All of the Batman, there is Batman setup. There's Batman movie setup in this movie, which was so weird to me because I'm watching the movie and I'm like learning like, oh, that's how they cheated the edit because they just told Jesse Eisenberg, like, say these lines. And we're going to do one close-up of you and this on a green screen. And then he's like, what? And then you see the cut. And it's like at the end of the Justice League theatrical, it's a setup for a Justice League 2 where we get the Legion of Doom. But in the Snyder cut, it's a setup for a Batman movie that we never got because it was going to be like Deathstroke's going to go after Bruce Wayne. And it could have been cool, maybe. In the right hands,
Apocalypse, New God stuff,
and then there was going to be a cyborg movie, and that set up all this stuff for a potential cyborg movie. But I think
Deathstroke and Deadshot, those are two different characters, right?
Who?
Deathstroke and Deadshot.
Yeah, yes.
Deathstroke was
it's confusing.
Yeah, there's Deathstroke, there's Deadshot, there's Deadpool. So Deathstroke. Yeah. So Charlie, so you know, Deathstroke is named Slade Wilson. And you're already probably connecting the parallels. You're like, wait a minute. Slade Wilson, Wade Wilson, Deathstroke, Deadpool. They must be the same. They are connected. Basically, the guy who created the character of Deadpool was a fan of Deathstroke, who was at Marvel at the time. And he wanted to make his own version of that character, like a parody lampoon, almost like Ninja Turtles kind of parody character version of that. Yeah. And that became Deadpool. But it's based off of Deathstroke, which is the cooler version of the character. He's like a mercenary.
He's more like actual like badass kind of version.
He is. He's this badass.
And then the Marvel version, like taking today's dichotomy, which we established is not eternal, but like today's dichotomy is dark, stark, and depressing, and serious and real, and colorful and fun and jokey, and they seem to fit that dichotomy perfectly. But
I think with the other things with the Whedon stuff, because I know you guys are both kind of like leaning towards the Whedon cut. I think what I am.
I didn't think I would. Because I'm the guy who everybody always complains about length. Like everybody always complains about length. And I've never been in that boat because I'm the guy who wants to sit down and watch a movie, and I don't want the movie to end, and I want it to keep going. And
if the movie's done
there's
right,
only one movie in my there's a single movie my entire life that I'll give you guys. Let's just have a little fun here. I'll give you 3 guesses as to the one movie of all time that I actually checked my watch and was like, please, God, kill me. And I was like 45 minutes in. I'll give you let's just, in the interest of time, I'll give you a guess.
Batman v Superman.
It's not a superhero thing. It's not.
It's not a superhero movie. Give me a hint.
Something out. Just throw something. Freezing cold. Freezing cold. How about this? I don't want to say the R word on a live stream. Bear molestation.
I was gonna say Revenant.
The Revenant. The Revenant is like probably the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And anybody watching this can judge me on that. Go ahead. I don't care. That movie, that movie is similar to it's the same exact concept as what I was saying earlier about the trailer is great and people go see the movie and it hits you with this profound imagery, these dream images. This movie must be smart. If I say I like it, people are going to say I'm smart too. No. All the movie was just watching a guy get tortured for like 3 hours, and then we're supposed to pretend like it's Oscar worthy or something. That movie is trash.
That's the Snyder fans. That's the Snyder fans. The people who are like, oh, he must be really smart. I get what he's trying to say. I must be smart too.
We have mommy daddy issues going on. That must be profound. And I'll say that it's a good movie, and then people will think I'm smart. Just like when people are like
they're not
foreign movies are great. Old movies are great. No. Old or new, foreign or domestic, it doesn't matter. I judge every movie based on its own merits, and watching like I'm the guy who wants to put in Lord of the Rings and watch it for 12 hours straight without taking a pee break. Like I'll pee in bottles and I won't eat. That's me. I'm good with long, but with the Snyder cut, like let's lay out the added things, right? They have like
there's
more Barry Allen, more Victor Stone, like more like
just
like again
more
mommy, like just expanding everybody's mommy daddy issues.
But it's not just more, it's also like
any of it.
It's not just more. Like that's like Snyder is more of a visualist, right? Like that is like we've established that, right? Like everything he does is much more visually pleasing. And I think one of the criticisms with Whedon, even in his cut, where Whedon's strengths in his dialogue and his more understanding of the characters, at least. But I think the problem with that, when you put his version on the Snyder stuff, you're like, here was the Snyder thing, but I'm gonna pull from Christopher Reeve and make our Superman this.
Yes,
and that's
it's a Frankenstein's monster. It's night and day.
It's a little weird.
Whedon would have done if they would have given this to Whedon from the get-go, it'd be different.
The other part of that, and this has also been pointed out even in the Avengers films, is that Whedon doesn't really have a sense of like cinematic visuals because people will say, oh, but he did the Avengers, he did that, the thing where I'm like, you guys, there is a thing called a second unit director who usually handles all the big action stuff. And even if he gave a stamp of approval, it's like if you watch the scenes that he directs, they're typically television, very, very television. It's very like shot, reverse shot, like no movement in the camera.
Television is more like character.
It's a writer's,
and that's where he's strong.
Exactly.
And you see that.
Exactly.
You see that.
That's his background.
Cut.
That's
And that's what Justice League.
So what are we seeing with what's the through line here? What we're seeing with Zack Snyder is Zack Snyder comes from commercials, which is about moments, and then we have a guy
and music videos
coming from TV. And honestly, if they could have teamed up, and it's like, okay, Joss, you're gonna write it, like even if they co-directed it, and it was just like, I'm gonna handle the character stuff, I'm gonna handle the visuals. That's the ultimate what if.
That's
like
what if
Zack Snyder,
they could have done that.
If Zack Snyder was a second unit director, I think the world would be like, oh, this. Like people, if we as filmmakers did not have like this, as much as I love this because this is what film people latch onto the most, is this idea of auteur theory, right? Like we're all like we're fans of specific directors, for filmmakers at least. We're a fan of Tarantino. We're a fan of Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, whoever.
Tell us what auteur means, McCurdy. What does auteur mean? It sounds French.
Oh, it is French. It's this theory. Why am I explaining this? Am I explaining this because they don't know? They don't know.
Yeah.
So it's the theory in film that kind of got developed mainly from French critics. There's probably a French critic specific.
Auteur means author and
an author, right? Yeah. But the idea is that the director is the author of the movie essentially, and his vision, his ideas are in that movie, and you see his vision in all of his movies and everything.
Because before that, it was like the writer was praised, or like the director was seen as a producer. The director was just seen as a guy on set who just like made sure that stuff happened.
He's like doing like.
But then eventually, it's like, no, the director. Director.
But when you hear things 70s. Like when you hear stuff like an auteur director versus just like a director or character director or something like that, really speaks more to. Think of like today, as far as working directors, people think about. They think about Wes Anderson. They think about Christopher Nolan. They think about J.J. Abrams. They think about Michael Bay. They think about Zack Snyder. What do they all have in common? There's stuff that Tarantino.
He's like the king of the auteurs
right
now. Yeah.
What do they all have in common? They all have a very specific visual style and way of the things that they latch onto their movies that you can see as you're watching their movies. Like you can watch any Tarantino movie and be like, that's a Tarantino movie, or a Wes Anderson movie, and just look at it and you're like, you do the thing in Hollywood where he's like, boom, that You know, he knows that who directed this movie. Versus, we're doing the Bond series. You should subscribe to Ranked. Throwing it out there. We're talking about all the Bond films. When we get to GoldenEye, Charlie, who directed GoldenEye?
Martin Campbell.
Martin Campbell is not somebody you would associate as a auteur director because he's kind of a chameleon. Like most of his movies, they're great.
King, though.
Mask of Zorro.
He did Mask of Zorro. His movies are great, but there's nothing that like visually is like, I'm like, that's a Martin Campbell movie. Like I would never.
If you told me that the guy who did GoldenEye also did Casino Royale, I would never have believed you.
Yeah,
I mean they're kind of different movies, but that's where my point is.
Which in and of itself is interesting. So it's like, does the fact that all of your movies look and feel the same? It's kind of arguable whether or not that's a good thing. You know, it's like on the one hand, it's interesting because all of those people are themselves like interesting individuals. Like Wes Anderson is like the king of the
storybook, storybook.
Working in advertising, the number one thing you always hear is like, we want it to be like Wes Anderson. Like everybody wants everything to be like Wes Anderson.
You want the fonts, you want the colors, you want the flat look.
It's so creative. It's so creative. Yeah. And it's, but my whole point is that like, is it better to call attention to yourself? Like, cause you can be, I remember the first time I saw Six Underground, and it's hilarious to call Michael Bay an auteur, but based on those rules, he is. My folks just put on Six Underground, and within 2 minutes, I said, "Fuck, is this a fucking Michael Bay movie?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it is." I'm like, "Yeah, you can." And specifically, you can tell, not from the amount of TNA, but specifically by his explosions. All of his explosions have the exact same look, but I was like, oh, God. And that's what I mean is like, is it good that all of your stuff congeals and has that look, that same look and feel every time? Or is it better to be a Martin Campbell who you're like, wait, the guy who made GoldenEye is the same guy who made Casino Royale? He must be a BA, but like you wouldn't know that the same guy made it. So it's kind of a give and take, you know?
Yeah. But I think the other point to add to that though is that like you, even if all your films are like together, sometimes I wonder, it's like, it's more of your personal preference and your choice. And I think some of those directors just have really strong choices. Like they it's like their handbag of tricks, right? Like Michael Bay's handbag of tricks is crazy explosions, really sharp and really elaborate camera movements that he likes to do. And it's like every shot. And it's like Snyder, where Snyder's like...
Wait, Michael Mann or Michael Bay?
Michael Bay. Did I say Michael Mann by accident?
You said Michael Mann.
Michael Mann, on the other hand, is all very dark, gloomy.
Digital cameras, dark and gritty.
It's a very different look. But like what I'm saying is like it's more like their personal
middle of the night, got
how
that
to do
single light on somebody. Yeah.
But it's like you try to put, certain directors trying to do movies that aren't really in their wheelhouse or genre, then you get really interesting choices. Like comes to mind like Tim Burton trying to do an art movie or a movie about art. It's like, this is not Tim Burton. Like, this is not what I expect from a Tim Burton movie. But you get a different thing. Like, if you try to give Zack Snyder...
Everybody's skin is so dark. Why?
Yeah.
This must not be... They need to be pale. Everybody needs to be deathly ill pale.
But Zack Snyder wants to do, like, like I've been talking about this Ayn Rand thing. Like, he's been wanting to do this movie called The Fountainhead. Is it The Fountainhead or The Fountain? It's The Fountainhead, right?
The Fountainhead, which I read that book. I actually really enjoyed it back in the day. Yeah.
It's a book essentially about a business guy who has these like the government's basically trying to put him down.
Who's like a perfectionist, essentially.
Exactly. And he doesn't. He's trying to object to their ideas, and he's like, "No, I'm going to do things because I want to do them." And like, fuck you guys,
because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly, and it's like it's right because it's good because I want it to do, and then
like everyone will benefit. The guy designs a building that's like perfect, and then when they go to build it, they try to change things, and he ends up just blowing up the building rather than let anything less than his ideal, perfect design come to fruition.
Yeah. Which you can kind of see.
I remember that like 20 years hence, essentially.
But you can kind of see where that ideology kind of can creep into these movies a little bit, where it's like, what? Like, are you really that like, don't think any kind of criticism or anything is going to help you at all in life? can kind of weigh down on these movies.
Yeah, my son is perfect. He hacked into your system and changed grades.
Yeah.
Yeah, like immediately I was like, wow, you're an awful mother. Like you're a terrible person. You know, like helping somebody to cheat, like that doesn't how is that person benefited by just not learning what was on an exam and just getting an A? Like it just and it's stupid to even like get into that motivation. Like bottom line is that's kind of my point, is that this movie, layer upon layer upon layer that is put into it. And again, I appreciate the length. I love the fact that it's long and it's got these like 6 parts that slowly grow. But at the same time, what did they spend that time doing? Other than like, I'm very curious. If you took every slow motion shot and you sped it up to normal speed, would this movie be cut by an hour? Perhaps. Yeah. Maybe it'd be 3 hours
scenes,
long. But I don't care. Like slow motion can actually be really beautiful. But
that's something structurally that I'm sorry, Jeff. That's something structurally that Whedon did, is that he took, because if you watch the Snyder Cut begins with him finding Aquaman. And it's also pointed out that he doesn't know anything about the mother boxes at this point in the beginning of the movie. Which it's something that's in the comic books. And I could go
it's
the Martha boxes. The Martha boxes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't in the Snyder Cut, he just knows that he's like, I gotta form this team. Right. Yeah. And then we go on this very long extended piece of film where they go into all these things where are the characters at and all this stuff. Yeah. But in the Whedon version, who's like probably a champion of exposition, because he's like, you know, he worked in television for many years. It's like, we got to get things going really quickly. It's like, no, we'll compress all that into a montage. You get the idea, you know, Kent Farm, all this bad stuff's happened. Superman's dead. You get that idea. We're going to speed up the whole sequence with Superman trying to get Aquaman.
But the cell phone
footage, it's a little different.
The cell phone footage at the opening, though, like now seeing this cut and then seeing that cell phone footage at the beginning, what was he trying to say there?
I think he was just trying to establish that this is going to be a lighter-hearted Superman movie, and the Superman's going to care more and not be somebody who's like this angsty, like because that was I think that's one of the problems.
Problems with Batman v Superman. You talk about that, like, you want your Batman dark, but you want your Superman to be the light. You want to, like, they're supposed to be contrast. Even like the animated stuff, you watch the animated Batman stuff, it's all dark paint. The backgrounds are painted on black paper. The Superman's all daylight. He's more goofy. He's the Boy Scout. He's supposed to be lighthearted. He's supposed to be the guy that kids are going to want to walk up to get an autograph from.
He is, if I could use this analogy, Batman is Black Ops. Superman is the idealistic hero that you put on a war memorial.
Yep. Totally.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they are two drastically different things.
It's Captain America versus Captain America, and then like who would be their dark guy?
Like it's a Punisher kind of guy.
Totally,
maybe the Punisher.
And
Punisher, totally,
And that's why I at least appreciate what the Joss Whedon was trying to start in the beginning with that. Like, hey, let's have Superman. Like, kids are like, Superman, what's up? How's it going? Superman's going to be the superhero who's going to take the time to actually talk to the kids. Batman beats the bad guy, then GTFO's out of the scene. Just disappears.
Oh, kids. Reminds me of when I was a kid.
My
parents killed.
But that I think,
God, why is Batman crying on the news?
Like you bringing that up, that's like that would have been like an interesting story to do in a Batman movie. It's like I didn't have a childhood and I don't understand kids at all. That to me is interesting. Yeah. But like with Superman grew up. He had a childhood. He had all this.
The issue is with the Snyder Cut is like all the superheroes are all like we're all bleak. Everything is just sad all the time.
They all have mommy daddy issues.
But
like,
okay,
in the
comics,
different.
Let's
start going through them one at a time. Let's start going through them one at a time.
Let's start with Superman, because we had enough time with Superman. So Superman in the Snyderverse is a guy whose dad is like, hey, you're going to basically be Jesus to Earth. You are going to deliver them. You are going to save them. It's a very drastic message from... It's a hopeful message. But,
real quick.
But
speaking of ham-fisting everything, when he walks into his Fortress of Solitude, I could have used one, maybe 2 lines from, because he has 2 dads, right?
My 2 dads.
And you're talking about in the Snyder Cut, right?
Kevin
Costner. You have Russell Crowe, who plays his Kryptonian dad, and then he plays Jor-El. and then
Jonathan Kent. Jonathan
Kevin
Kent, Kevin
Costner
Costner.
plays Jonathan
Jonathan Kent. Yeah, and
so you're saying
so
that
he
you could have
walks
only
into the
taken
Fortress
one
of
line.
Solitude, and you just start hearing, because I think that's in the part whatever that's like a father
when he
twice
gets
over
the
or whatever. Or
yeah,
like,
when he gets
whatever.
his suit, which is also
Yeah.
a weird moment because I'm going to dive in it real quick. It's a weird moment because in the comics, which you're going to hear a lot, right, when we talk about this movie, it's like, but in the comics, this happens. Superman dies in the comics, and then he is resurrected, and it was a big moment in comic book history at the time because no one really killed off the big superhero.
Like he had the dark suit, right?
He had a dark suit, but the dark suit in the comics was like Superman's not strong enough. He came back to life, but he's still like needs more power, and Superman's powered by the sun. So you need a solar suit, a regeneration suit, and that's why he wears a black suit in the comics. But but to your point earlier, Snyder's like, well, that's cool. Black suit Superman, like just like any kid is like,
just oh
cool, like his costume's different, but like it doesn't really make sense with the movie because it's like, well, he could have had a brightly lit, colored, hopeful suit because he's supposed to be a new Superman.
That would have reflected too much light, and physically, dark colors absorb the energy.
I laugh at that when he's just going through the room. He's like, "Well, I'm just going through my wardrobe. Too bright, too mechanical."
Exactly. I like this. I'm dark now. I'm dark.
Well, okay, let me
get
my point out though. What I was saying though is that the whole like there's like a part with two dads, but it was talking about Victor Stone's dad, who was like, I was your dad twice. I brought you into the world, and then I brought you back into the world. But you also then couple that with the two dads that Superman has. He's walking through the hall, and you literally hear every line ever uttered by both of those characters. And it's like, God, like pick one or two that mean something and just hit us with them when they are applicable and mean something. But otherwise, it's like, again, Zack Snyder's like, just hit him with it. It's going to have so much meaning, And it's like,
have that music video.
Like,
we got that music.
We got to go over the top. Everything's got to be over the top.
I just keep thinking about in Batman vs Superman the random scene of just like Kevin Costner on the mountain, just throwing rocks in a pile, talking to Superman,
or sitting in a church, and it's like, ooh, we're in a church. There's significance here. Like it's like a fucking sociopath is making these movies and just like shoveling rocks, like shoveling as much angsty stuff at you. Like, does this work? And it's just it's way too much, and it lacks any subtlety. And that's fine in your fine in your superhero movie, but when you're trying to do something like serious, and profound. Let's go back. Let's
rewind. Right, we're talking about Superman.
We're talking about Superman. But then we have Jonathan Kent.
His daddy issues.
His daddy issue is like Jonathan Kent doesn't want him to be Superman, which is not really what is the comic books essentially. Like his dad kind of in the comics, his dad's like teaches him to be like, you should be a good man. You should do because you have this, the Spider-Man adage. It's like you have great responsibility to do good for the world. You should be a hero essentially. You should help people. But this version's like, maybe don't save them because I am worried that, people, the government's not going to, the world's not ready for you, Clark. The world's not ready for you. Yeah. And you shouldn't do this because that's Superman. This Batman is, we see his mom and dad get killed in BVS. And we know that he's a war-torn Batman. We know Robin's dead. We know he's been in Gotham for many years. He's jaded. He kills criminals, which is different from
Snyder loves his Frank Miller, so he's gonna do the Frank Miller Batman.
Frank Miller Batman, and this version of Batman is I like that they kind of were doing something different, but I think the issue is that the Batman, at least in what Christopher Nolan mastered, is that he did 3 movies about a Batman who doesn't kill people for a purpose and a reason. And he doesn't want to dive in to become a criminal himself. He wants to do things for good. And then you get, which is so funny.
As soon as you've made your point, I got to read the comments so far because
I know it's all my
yours, and they're hilarious.
They're all my
Sorry, real quick. Kevin Arnold says Zack Snyder is a masterful director, and you guys are just haters. Hashtag put Snyder back in charge.
It's-
DH Media says Zack is the greatest of all time. Also, 300 is the greatest film of all time behind Justice League Snyder Cut. Kevin responds with DH Media talks truth. These three guys were paid off by Whedon, who has a sexual fetish for destroying Snyder's brilliance because he's jealous. I have a meme to prove it. And these aren't super chats. They didn't pay us to read these.
No,
Darn.
These are my friends being smartasses, and I totally appreciate this. I totally love this.
Remember, my function is being the guy in the room that goes, I don't care how much you want it to be true. I have a really, really high class bullshitometer, and I'm gonna call you out on wanting things to be better than they are. If only we could live in the universe where they paid Chris Nolan just $1 billion. Like, hey, Chris, we'll give you $1 billion to mastermind and be the Kevin Feige of the DC universe.
Yeah,
you alone.
I think you would have had
you're going to run the whole show.
Much better Superman, or a much better Justice League. So let's go back down the line.
I totally cut you off though.
Batman. We talked about Batman. You know all you need to know about Batman. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, at least had some kind of aspiring of hope in the Wonder Woman movie. I loved her arc where it was like she has this like very naive sense of like, I'm already pure and all this stuff. So instead of
she's the only character in this universe to have an arc, and
she has this cool arc of like, I'm naive, and I think that by killing the bad guy, it's going to solve all the world's problems.
Just kill evil, guys. Like, that's every idealist ever. If we just stop having bad things happen, and then she actually gets the opportunity to literally destroy evil, and then it's like,
then she finds out that's not the case.
It's not
so
that
we know
simple.
and then there's also this other thing where she has to leave Themyscira, and she can't come back to Themyscira, so she has to be the ambassador to man. Essentially, there's that whole little bit, and she's also the kind of the connection and expositionist about all the little like, there was once dark side and all this other stuff, and kind of all this kind of really cool, in my opinion, world building stuff that is part of what I liked about the Snyder movie version of the film.
Yeah, that's what
I liked all that
prologue, Lord of the Rings style prologue.
It would have been great.
It would have been great because she could have been the narrator. Still,
we'll go to Aquaman.
Totally.
So Aquaman, I think the Aquaman in this movie is slightly different from the one that James Wan gave us in the Aquaman movie, and it's like, you watch this movie and you're like, this is the goth version of Aquaman. Like, every Aquaman character comes out and they're like this darker, long hair version of it. She's Amber Heard.
Amber Heard in this one has a British accent, right?
Yeah.
And then in Aquaman movie, there's no accent.
Oh, and also Amber Heard's dad is alive in the other version. In this, her dad is dead and her mom. But the mommy daddy thing.
This is why you just need one guy in control of the whole thing. Just like, we need a Kevin Feige. Just
one dude.
But also remember, this was made before that Aquaman movie.
Aquaman movie was made off the Whedon version. Not
more of off that, because they were like, we don't think we'll ever get a Snyder version. So because for the dummies out there, we're gonna base it off this version.
Also, I love how Aquaman at least fixed the whole like we don't have to have a bubble every time that we want to talk. We just talk into water. Let it be done. No question.
Yeah. But so anyway,
which is probably what they should have done, because it's like every time it's like I gotta
hold on. I like it when Stephen was fighting Mara. He's like choking her. She's like, wait, let me make a bubble so we can talk for a second.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, wait. Is she doing that for a purpose? It's like, oh no, it's just so she could be like, please stop choking me.
So Aquaman has so Aquaman's
I'll do to you what I did to Johnny. Just fuck off.
So in the comics, in the Aquaman movie, we see this like relationship form between Aquaman's dad and his mom. And his mom's the queen of Atlantis and all this stuff. And there's this relationship, and then they have this kid, and it becomes like an issue because it's a kid. It's not a wedlock, but it's also in like a whole royal family thing, and it's a crossbreeding thing, and so it's like he's the bastard child type thing. In the Snyder version, it's like, my mother dropped me on my father's doorstep and left, and it's like, is that what happened? Because that's not what you're told. Is that what happened? So it's like he's got
drown myself in booze and women.
So his whole story arc is like,
water.
His whole story is like, I don't like Atlantis. I don't believe in Atlantis. I'm not a fan. It's like the whole time, every line of dialogue out of his mouth usually is like, I don't like Atlantis. I'm an Atlantean, but I don't like them. And
You're not
then
my
we
man.
go, and then we get to Flash, who his story arc in this movie is he needs to get a job. And so you're aware, Charlie. So you're aware in the comics they established this whole story in the comics.
If
I
you
wish
would
I
have
had
read,
some.
if you would have read these 1,700 books, you would know. You would know.
In the comics, there was this
You gotta
specific.
lay it up for me.
There was this specific storyline in the comics where they set up that Barry Allen's dad was in jail for killing his mom, and then he finds out that and they showed this in the TV show. They did this in the show, the Flash television show, where Flash went back in time, finds out his mortal enemy, Reverse Flash, yes, that's his name, killed his parents. There's way more I could talk about. And so that's why he's like, he grows up and he's like, I'm going to become I'm going to get into criminology and figure out like who actually killed my dad. And like, that's his motivation. But this version's like, does one scene to establish his love interest that'll be in the Flash movie and to show off his powers in the Snyder version. And then also a scene that establishes this storyline where it's like, you need to get a job. You need to, start, don't worry about me. You need to start worrying about your own life. And it kind of like, as you've been saying, it's very ham-fisted, especially at the end of the movie when he's like, all right, Barry, you got to do this. And he's like running super fast and he's saying all this stuff.
He's reversing time.
And it's like, that's cool, but why does it have to
lay it
be
out? Let me lay it out.
This other stuff.
This is what it comes down to for me. So we like breeze through everybody else's mommy daddy issues because they're there, but like nothing's done with it other than you got to take up your mom's trident. It's like, okay,
but it's going to be like, this is going to be in the next movie.
It's like wanting to be like Aragorn, Aragorn, like take up his Isildur, like I do not want that power, and but
yeah,
instead of taking 3 movies to build up to that, instead it's like we just have this one, which again is we have this weird mishmash where instead of just plopping us in the middle of Justice League and saying and doing things that might confuse the average listener, but it, and viewer, but like it maybe it works as it goes on. Instead, you have this just mess. It's just a mess. But anyway, so when it comes to Barry Allen is his motivations are like the most inconsequential, right? He needs a job, but it doesn't. Me watching the movie again, I don't know anything about the comics. I've seen like a good amount of the animated stuff, like
and that's
whatever.
Totally fair. Like
Barry Allen
not knowing anything.
Yeah, his whole motivation is to get a job, right? And so we have a whole scene about him trying to get a job. And I mean that's a whole conversation in and of itself because he has a love at first sight moment with this chick who they like again like talking about like way over the top and ham-fisting stuff. They stare each other down as she's driving a car out into an intersection. Like these aren't human beings. Like I get they're metahumans, but like they're supposed to act like human beings. And yeah, he's staring at her.
They're not human characters.
She's reciprocating the look, driving a motor vehicle into an intersection. Like she's rubbernecking hard. It's like, God, just do half that. Have her give a strong look and then look away. Like, but it's just, again, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. We have this 20-minute scene to set up that he needs a job and also like he needs a girlfriend, I guess. Like whatever. Like fine. And it's another separate note that she never comes back. And McCurdy, you're going to say that she's somebody out of the comics. I don't care. They never bring her up again. And they didn't say her name. Like
it's a sin that a lot of these modern movies are doing as far as like one of the problems with trying to set up a universe is
like it'll come back later.
It'll come back later.
And I get it. I get it.
Iron Man did this.
I get it. Let me just continue because like all you need is a bookend scene to be like, oh, she is coming back, rather than like, just wait a couple of years till the next movie. That's my point. Like just let him get his rocks off at the end.
When we were doing the epilogue, when they were doing the epilogue, he could have like talked to her at the end of it, right? That could have been a scene.
He's just got his arm around her. That's all you need. Yeah. But here's my point. My point is this: his whole thing is, I need to get let's set the girlfriend aside. Mm-hmm. His whole thing is, I need to get a job. He has the ability to just steal everything. The guy literally doesn't need a job because he could just steal. oh, but wait, I have a dad in prison. Like there's a clear missed opportunity there to have this whole thing of like, son, I don't want you to do what I did. And I didn't know he was in there for murder. I don't care. Dad's in jail. That's all you need to know. It means he did bad things. So like, I need you to get a job. Why? Because I need you to not do what I did. Don't make my same mistakes.
Yeah.
The temptation to just steal to get by would be huge if you have super speed. The wasted opportunity there is to just have that be like, you know, he could just be rich. He could just like have tons of money, or he could do the right thing. But like, instead, it's just this trivial, like, I need a day job, or like I need a serious
he needs a
job.
Career versus a job.
Yeah, and it just comes
That's what it
across
is.
as lame, and just like and maybe that's what we're supposed to gather, where he walks into his lair, right? And he's got like clearly he's got money because he's got like
all this stuff.
All this stuff, right? But his dad needs him to have a job, I guess. But
they'll build this super special suit and everything out of like really advanced parts and pieces, but he can't get a day job.
So like, was he stealing all that money, or was he getting it from like working these meaningless jobs? Or but anyway, so then fast forward to the end of the movie, where like, what are movies supposed to do? They're supposed to push the audience. Like I've watched, and we all have watched numerous movies where you're sitting in a dark theater with strangers, and you feel compelled to like, yeah, like you feel like I've gotten like crowds to like, yes, like over something, right? Like we want movies to be triumphant. So even if his daddy story is kind of lame, you still have this build up to this supposedly triumphant moment where he's like, right, he's running in slow-mo and he's like,
just a weird running thing.
Daddy, you were right about me, Daddy. Oh, I'm the great. Like, you're like, what? I
don't want to hear that in my ear.
It's so weird. But like all you needed was so we had we planted the seed that if he runs fast enough, it reverses time. We had that in the
Speed Force,
in the Fortress of Solitude moment with resurrecting Superman. So he realized, like, we have our moment, we have our all is lost moment where like Victor Stone, he can't contain the thing, it blows up, like everybody's dead, right? But then he realizes, oh, if I run fast enough, I can reverse time. And he's doing it. And instead of having like this moment of triumph where he's like, you were right, Dad! You were right! Like something that would like raise the hair on your skin and give you chills and make you sit in that theater and go, yeah! Instead, you get this like, you're right, Dad. Oh, I'm the best, Daddy. And I just go, God, who is making these decisions? Like, just give me that moment of triumph. But that's what I mean. There's all this like setup for like supposedly profound stuff with zero catharsis across the board. Everybody has mommy daddy issues, and they don't do a fucking thing with any of it.
It took me a while to realize what was actually happening with that flash scene where things were supposed to be going back in time. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, why are things just randomly, like, things appear under his feet as he's running? Like, is everything I didn't get what was going on until like he finally reached.
Did you pick up on that in the first scene, in the scene with the mother box? Did you pick up on the fact that the box was dropping and then suddenly it was up because he was running too fast, right? Yeah. Like that's why that planted the seed for the idea that if he runs fast enough, he runs back in time, essentially. And that's like how I'm gonna
point something out to your point, Charlie, about the catharsis in this film. And that's that like Batman is supposed to have an arc in this movie, but it's more or less like he doesn't have an arc in this movie. He has an arc that is supposed to go from the last movie into this movie.
He has faith. And,
he
said the word faith, and faith is
like
supposed
faith,
to be
Alfred,
profound.
Faith. But
faith
it's like
is supposed to mean something, and it's just meaningless.
Well, I know, but the idea is like he's supposed to start at like the idea I think they're going for is like he's supposed to start off as like this guy who is like, I don't work with anybody else. I work alone. I don't like anybody. And then he slowly over time is like, oh no, I need to form this Justice League. But like we start off the movie where we
start off with, we need to form a team.
We need
I
to form a
promised
team.
I would form a team, and we need to because there
And
may or
there's
may not be bad guys.
nothing-
And like
there's
he's even
nothing-
saying, he's like, we need to form this team in case something happens, and then Wonder Woman's like, it's already happening. You know, like it's
like
just
I think you could boil. I think you
Ah.
could boil the Snyder problem down to like stretching like a good a good screenwriter, whatever, or screenwriter, a good. And also I need to point out that Zack Snyder's not also making all these decisions. You have Chris Terrio, but how much Snyder says, "Hey, write this in the
again,
script."
it's not DC making the decisions; it's Warner Brothers making the decisions, and just constantly.
Well, yes and no,
making
but
the
that's a
wrong
whole.
ones, you
That
know.
is a whole other story. But at the end of the day, it's like they're adding all this stuff, but it's like Zack Snyder, a good screenwriter, a good filmmaker would be like, okay, put all the plot points in the same movie, put all the put him. This is him at the beginning of the movie. This is him at the end of the movie in the same movie. But what Zack Snyder's film and the franchise does is like, no, I'm going to make this big, epic, long movie with all these emotional and slow-mo things. And so we're going to put
It's going to be profound. We're going to use words like faith, and we're going to have mom and dad issues. It's going to be profound.
Jesse Eisenberg yells God a lot.
Yeah, but let's put the
Exactly.
Let's put the thing that's supposed to be Batman where he begins in the first movie, which is, oh, we get a sense that Robin's dead. Oh, he's been Batman for many years. Oh, he works alone now. Oh, he kills people. All that stuff. Put it, and then he hates Superman because Superman's he's a threat to the world and all this other crap. Let's put that in this movie, this Dawn of Justice prequel movie that doesn't, it's a mess, whatever. And then all the stuff that a good writer would be like, no, like that's his arc. Like he starts out here where he doesn't think we need to start a league. And then he goes to the end of the movie where he's like, no, I believe in the league. This is a good idea. I don't know why I was being such an a-hole, but like, that's what we should have done. And so you get this movie that's like, starts off where Batman's already halfway through his arc from the last movie. And he's like, now I got to form the team. Now the team's got to succeed. Now the team, like, there's no beat where the team like fails and Batman feels bad about it failing. He's just like, no, we got to keep going,
So I brought you here. Everything's great. Yeah. Well, okay. Quick side note: the very first thing, and I'm curious if either of you know why. The very first thing that I saw jumping up on my screen was something I haven't seen in a long time, where it's like this video has been reformatted to fit your screen, and I'm like, wait, what? Like the 4:3, but I mean, really, it says like it's 4:3 to match his original vision.
It was gonna be IMAX.
Was it all shot? Was it all shot in IMAX or something?
It wasn't all shot. It was just planned for IMAX.
So why? But they usually crop it down to a 16:9.
So
anyway,
if you watch Dark Knight, so go back to 2008 because I use Dark Knight for everything.
Well, yeah,
right?
and it jumps back and forth. It's not
it
all
jumps
one or
back
the
and
other.
forth because the ratio is definitely different. Like right now, we're in a 16:9 ratio.
Yeah, but this entire movie is 4:3. Did they really intend to release it?
I mean, and you also
4:3.
Yeah, but it's not. It's 4:3. But you also have
I think he did just so it wouldn't be jarring. It wouldn't constantly switch between back and forth.
But you also have to remember that, like, you have people like Stanley Kubrick who even shot their movies in 4:3 and then would crop them, and then you have DVD releases of those same movies that don't have the bars which had in the theatrical release. It's a 4:3 screen, and people are like, "Why is it 4:3? It shouldn't be 4:3. It should be this." And this is the DVD. This is the most modern version of the film. It's because Stanley Kubrick filmed it 4:3, and then they just released it 4:3.
But what was his intention? Was his
I think it's
do
to be
it all
different.
the time.
I really think it was just him to try to be like, "Look, I did it in 4:3 because this is how I wanted to be."
That's
what I'm saying. Is that what it comes off as is like, this is how pure it is. It's so pure in terms of Snyder's vision that it's even in old ass television formatting.
Well,
and I get that that's IMAX. Like,
so
I get
two
that,
things.
But,
so something I didn't even talk about the history, which I think everybody else who's talking about the Snyder Cut talked about, and because we're talking about Snyder, we have to elongate things that don't need to be elongated. But
yeah, naturally
talking about this movie particularly. We know Batman v Superman did not perform as well as it should have. It performed well if you actually look at the numbers. It's like made $600 million. It's a lot of money. But it's Batman versus Superman. That movie should have made $1 million, $1 billion.
You got to ask yourself why.
Why? It should have made
did a piece of shit movie not make $1 billion?
It should have made $1 billion. But so the studio got nervous, and it really kind of adjusted their plans even for Suicide Squad, but also for this movie. And this movie came out in 2017. Batman v Superman came out in 2016. They were already in the process of filming Justice League while BVS was coming out. So midstream, they're like, hey, you need to make all these changes. We're not going to do it part 2. It has to be shorter. It has to be more lighthearted. We have to have more humor. And you see that in the Snyder Cut. Like, that's not like it's not there. But what happens is, and this is, I've heard 2 stories. One that's like floats around the internet that people don't acknowledge. But essentially, Snyder was fired. But then the story that most people are talking about is Snyder's daughter committed suicide. And which is,
I didn't realize
very tragically his daughter committed suicide.
His daughter committed
his wife
suicide.
is producer on the film too. So him and his wife both left the film. And that's
they
when
left
Whedon
the film.
came in.
And so this is why a lot of the Snyder this is a lot of the reason why the whole Snyder Cut thing happened was because of this. As much as if you hate the movie, which I understand why,
I knew she passed. I didn't realize it was suicide.
She committed suicide. And like, for anybody who's a parent, that's like, that's kind of hits you kind of hard.
And
it hits you hard.
I don't mean to make a cruel joke here, because like it's literally like I can't imagine. That's terrible.
That's horrible.
But honestly, the tragic thing when it comes, because like this movie will be around, presumably this movie will be around long after we're all gone, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole like, art can't be excused because like of tragedy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's either going to be remembered
People
or
go back to watch the movie more often, so you're going to spend a lot of tedious detail on every little thing.
Honestly, the hardest I was hit emotionally watching the Snyder Cut, and I'm not making a joke. Honestly, it was when For Autumn popped up, and I was like,
yeah.
But do you catch my point? The movie didn't hit me emotionally.
It's everything outside the movie.
It should have.
It's like
that moment did, and that had nothing to do with the movie itself. You know what I mean? Like, and
it's
speaks
like
volumes as to the effectiveness of these movies.
No, and I get that, but the other part of that is that basically that happens. So he's like, I got to step away, guys. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And the studio, this is the kind of the through line story that every media piece is talking about as far as the Snyder Cut, is the studio, Warner Brothers, is like, okay, Snyder's gone. And then we have someone who is from DC Comics, Jeff Johns, and John Berg, who were the heads of the DC Comics. They were essentially trying to be the Kevin Feige's, right? They're like, hey, I've already got who we could bring on. We got Joss Whedon, and everybody knows Joss Whedon did Avengers, and everybody knows Avengers was great. And, you know, this guy knows comic books, and he does. So they get Joss Whedon to come in and basically do the reshoots, but the reshoots go from being supposed to be 2 weeks to like over a month of reshoots. And it's kind of telling. It's like, oh no, he rewrote the movie. Like, if you watch both, and Charlie, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take both cuts, make your own version of it. Because if you watch both versions, there's pieces of stuff that you're like, wait, that wasn't in this. This isn't in this. It's not just
or like alternate takes too.
Oh yeah,
like
it's alternate
takes.
There's a lot of stuff that's different between the two, but it's also like, we didn't cut new scenes that were just there so that they could compress stuff down to make it easier to understand, or even give Batman and Wonder Woman this kind of like contrasting arc between the two, which wasn't in the Snyder Cut. So all this happens, and then we get.
Sorry, we have a fresh comment from DH Media saying they have to be paid by Warner Brothers to try and hate on Snyder. Yeah, they should pay me to hate on Snyder. I'm so good.
So
if you're good at something, never do it for free.
No.
Here we are for free.
Talking about
shitting on the man.
So they
continue
make this,
though. I cut you off.
So they basically are like, yeah, we're gonna do this version of it, and then there's other stuff that comes out that I don't really want to get into that has to do with the acting.
Yeah, wrap it up. Let's get back to the movie itself.
So when this movie comes out, a lot of people complained because it was like the studio wanted it to come out quickly in 2017 because they were like, we can get our bonuses if we get this movie to come out, and obviously the movie didn't do well.
Yeah.
So they were just like, let's fart this turd out, get this thing done, and we'll just wash our hands with it, and we're done. So we're done with it, right? But then now we have this thing, and I've even watched other videos that were talking about the Snyder Cut, like you and I were like, there's no way they're going to make this thing. But then steps in HBO Max, And HBO and Warner Brothers is trying to compete with Disney as well as Netflix, trying to get people to subscribe. What are things that we can do to bring that in? And sure enough, we get Zack Snyder. They're like, wait, it's a win-win now for us. Because like originally it wasn't. If we decided to fold and say, oh yeah, here's Zack Snyder's cut, now we look like the idiots. Because if it's good, then we're like, oh, we look stupid. Or if it's bad, we look stupid. But now it's like, wait, we can do this on Warner Brothers. We can do this on HBO Max. It brings in subscribers. People will be interested. People will be talking about it. We still get their subscription money. Now people are going to be into this version of the film. But what I add to that, though, what I say to that is like, part of me is like, is this really the Snyder cut? Or is this because it's like Snyder makes these weird decisions like the 4:3, or even suggesting he wanted the movie to be in black and white, or the fact that certain scenes are in this film that if this movie was theatrical, weren't going to need to be in the movie because we never went there, right? Like Martian Manhunter is in the movie twice. For whatever reason, they're like, here's Martian Manhunter. And it's like a fan servicey moment that's supposed to lead to something, but it's not there. So there's all these
do any favors for the character either, because he like you could say that maybe it was like maybe it's a good moment when he pulls one over on Lois Lane and like and you know, maybe that's fun for the fans or whatever. And like, and I knew, I mean, with my limited knowledge, my non-comic book knowledge, I knew who he was because I've seen because I've seen some animated
or whatever,
Justice League stuff. But then at the end, he just flies in.
He comes in and he's like, "Hey, if you need me,
he literally just floats in. He's just like, "Hey, Batman." And Batman's like, "Hey, who are you?" Like it was like,
where were you when we were
fighting? This scene
fighting?
doesn't do any favors for this character at all.
No.
Like nothing.
It's like it makes him look like an idiot. It's like, where were you when we were fighting Steppenwolf? Like, where were you when we were in the bad climax?
That, he just flies. Like Batman just walks outside. Like
after he woke up, like he was asleep. And
he
he's like,
wakes up and walks outside, and then the guy just flies down and is like, "Oh, by the way, I'm a Martian," and he's like, "Oh." What? Like I'm hungover. Like what? Like,
well, you see, Charlie, as a nerd, in the comics, he has telepathy, and like I'm just saying, like that would be the fan explanation. Is like, well, he has telepathy, so he probably woke him up and told him to come outside.
I honestly would have rather have seen the actual Snyder cut that would have come out if he had not left the project.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that's
the kind of really want. I want to see the one that like they still have told him like you have to make this 2 hours still.
Yeah.
He would have had to cut
this down. Like they were like, here, we're going to give you whatever you want to make your stupid movie. Here you go. Here you go. You can do whatever. We don't really want you to because we don't like what you do, but here you go.
Well,
you can do whatever you want.
How did this thing end up being like, 4 hours? Like, if it's really like,
but it's like, I think
the original Snyder vision was never going to be 4 hours. Remember, like me, I think the whole like 2 hours in a theater thing, I think that's like, I'm glad that that's going away. I'm glad that we live in the age of streaming now where like
in television
I'm the crazy guy who thinks that like everybody's like, buy AMC, bring AMC back to life. And I'm like, no. Let all movie theaters die. I am A-okay with like there being one movie theater in every major city and that's it. Otherwise, it's all streaming, because what that lends to is exactly what we're seeing right now, where you can release a 4-hour cut of a movie.
You're not restricted by these rules that we've created over
because they're arbitrary, because people are like, I'm bored, I have to pee. And I'm like, fuck off and go do that. But like, I'm going to hit play on a movie and I'm not going to hit pause until it's done. Like, and I don't care how long it is, as long as it works. And maybe it does or maybe it doesn't. But we have this arbitrary 2-hour limit, which is terrible because, and I don't, because it's arbitrary and studios then have to abide by it because it's like, well, the numbers tell us that we'll make X more dollars if we blah, blah, blah. That's where I'm like, oh, great. This is liberating. Like movie theaters can all die and movies can be in as long as they want. But that being said, this was never intended to be 4 hours. There's no way. Did they just take everything off the cutting room floor and just jam it back in?
That's what it feels like. But I think at best, this would have been like a 3-hour movie. And I think at least in my opinion, if you've watched both cuts of BVS, one of the problems with the theatrical is there are a lot of exposition that just kind of is ignored and makes the rest of the movie really confusing. You're like, wait, why is he doing this? Like motivations are like thrown out the window because, and I've always said this about one of the problems with some of these modern movies with a lot of CGI. It's like, okay, you got two choices here. You can cut the scene that we spent $4 million on, or you can cut the scene that we spent $500,000 shooting. Which one are you going to cut? You're going to cut the one that doesn't cost them as much money on the other end.
Which is a shame. Like
yeah.
anybody
and
knows
so
anything about that, like the best part about being an editor
Snyder,
is that everybody's like, wait, we put so much effort into that shot. We spent like 2 hours trying to make it perfect. And the editor goes, I wasn't there. I don't care.
But, you know, but at the end of the day, though,
about
it's
making
like
fan edits. Fan edits are just like, I don't care. It doesn't work.
But at the end of the day, what's going to happen is you have all these effects artists that are going to be putting all this work and all this time and money into these big elaborate scenes that they're doing at Weta, right? And they're making all this crazy stuff. And at the end of the day, you're like, we spent a lot of money on this and it was already storyboarded beforehand. We're not going to cut little pieces out of it, but we will cut pieces out of the quieter moments and things that we think we can get away with. And what I think what works with Snyder, at least, because Snyder does his moments and doesn't do scenes, it helps him that he has 3-hour-long movies. And I think it also helps in this case that he had a longer cut version. Now, that being said, I don't think that wouldn't be, I think it would be very much possible to cut this down to a reasonable 3-hour cut or 2.5-hour cut and still get a better.
So many text messages and were like, Charlie, please cut this down.
Yes, I think, Charlie, I think you could cut a fan edit of this movie that could possibly be somewhere between 2 hours, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 45, maybe a 3-hour cut. But you could cut an hour out of this movie and take scenes that are like, we don't need this. We don't need this. We don't need this. Get rid of all of like, oh, we're going to do all this slow-mo and all this stuff. Like you could get rid of a lot of that stuff and you could probably come down to a reasonable timed movie that people would be like.
It would be fun to take certain, like it'd be a fun exercise because overall this whole thing, again, we were saying like how improbable it was that this would be released in the first place, and like you pointed out, it's like HBO Max steps in and enables it. But it is a fascinating exercise in showing just the average person just how different, wholly different, two different films can be. Because like I always say, people not in the know and children, they all consume movies as just like, well, what do you mean it could be different? It is what it is. How could it? What do you mean it could have been different? It's like, no. What people don't realize is that like when you're on a set and you're organically building these things, it's every tiny little detail of everything is its own decision. And like when you're directing, all you're doing is just fielding thousands of questions in one day, in 1 hour. It's just like, should it be this or this, this or this, this or this, multiplied by absolutely every possibility, to the point that when you watch the final product, you just go, well, yeah, that's what it is. That's what it, like we were talking about auteur theory. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Why would it be different? No. That individual person saw each of those little micro decisions in a different way and added up that all equals this movie that either works or doesn't. And
like what makes this one feel different is like the thing I always think about is, for me, I'm a guy who loves scores of films. I used to love it when I was a kid growing up. This was like that first time ever where I've had like, I have to say, I kind of got to see the same movie twice with completely different music and everything to it. Like, because the theatrical was Danny Elfman, who was famous for doing a lot of Tim Burton, including the Batman theme. Like the Batman theme you think of when you think of the animated series, that kind of stuff. Who threw that a little bit, he threw little touches of that in. He threw little touches of the John Williams Superman theme and the theatrical to then this one where it's always the same kind of like like that same kind of like
it's I wouldn't say it's
who did the new one? Who did the new one?
Junkie XL is his. He's not listed as that in the site on the.
He has like
film,
did he do the other ones though? Like did he do?
He did, yeah. So
DVS?
Him and Hans Zimmer did. I think you know what. Part of me wants to say he did part of. No. But he did. Yeah, he did the other films with Hans Zimmer.
What an amazing mess! These movies are such an incredible mess.
But I actually like the.
That's why I said
the
after
score.
BBS, I was like, okay, just cut your losses. Wait 5 years and just reset the whole thing. Like I said that after Batman v Superman. I was like, just cut your losses and reset. Like everybody will forget in 5 years, and you can slowly build back up your in Marvel style, build up your universe instead of trying to don't catch up with them. Think long term, but we live in a society that thinks only in the short term and is like, no, we need this
very reactionary.
now, you know.
These movies the DC movies are very reactionary as far as what's hot right now. What's hot?
You think about how many studios do, like, you think about like Universal try to do that dark universe thing with their monster Universal stuff that no one cared about. That
and then they come out with a couple of years later at least a mostly excellent Invisible Man movie that is like, we're not going to worry about connecting these things. Let's just make a really good Invisible Man movie. And what do? They make a really great movie, and people like it. And then they're like, well, we could have just done that and then built to being like, then we're going to throw these all together in a blender and then do whatever. But
it's insanely complicated to tackle something like what Marvel did. But what it requires is, as with all things, anybody who has ever done anything understands that a singular vision is the way to go. Like, that's why if people are like, what does a director do? And you kind of laugh because it's like, well, without them, nothing happens. Well, what do you mean? I thought that just like people show up on set and some of them are like actors and then they just stand in front of the camera and everything happens. And it's like, no. Forget about movies. Just when anything is going on in life in general, you have a leader. And that generally it's one person who just says, this is what we're going to do. And everybody follows that lead. And when somebody else challenges that, nothing works. Like when you have multiple, like the reason why
when you have a film by committee, it does not work.
Yes. And that's what like all these movies reek of is movie by committee where we got to have this and this and this and this, but we can't have this. And it's like, I cannot imagine, like I assume that like when somebody leaves something like this, they are relieved because they're not allowed to just make what they want to make.
Yeah, because you're making a big tentpole franchise thing. And I think at the end of the day, it's like Warner Brothers could have not dealt with this problem if they had just hired maybe the right people in the beginning and had this more.
We have faith that DC is going to care about their characters and actually make something of quality. But
if had Warner Brothers had started and just said, "Hey, let's make these DC superhero movies like Marvel's doing, but like let's do it one at a time. Let's start with Superman, but let's not get Zack Snyder to do it. Let's someone who's like who believes in the character and like actually listen to their pitch and be like." Zach, what's your pitch of this movie? Well, I think Superman shouldn't want to be Superman. And you're like, next, go that route and start there and not start with
real quick.
So
apparently DH Media was with us and then he left. And Kevin Arnold says DH Media has left. He must have also gotten paid off by Warner Brothers instead of sticking around to fight the good fight against this trio who don't understand the brilliance of Mr. Snyder. Snyder fans are being converted and silenced. I agree, sir. You forgot to put a hashtag in there. We need a hashtag that we can promote that everybody will see. I can't see the view count. I assume there are one, maybe two people watching. We need to spread the word. Everybody needs to know about this. But okay, we've gone on this tangent about like the filmmaking process in general. Let's get back to the movies because
the one thing we haven't really talked about is the villain. We haven't talked about Steppenwolf. Like we've kind of touched on here.
We did talk about
one thing we did talk about. Like the differences between him from the first one to this one being like the first one.
Lay it out.
I genuinely think that the Zack Snyder version is a drastic improvement over the Whedon version. Like I think it's like look wise and the motivations wise and like. I think it works way better.
That's the biggest thing I do give Zack Snyder's version is the villain is way better than I'm an evil villain man from space who wants my Martha boxes and I want to hold them.
Yeah, and
then this one's like, no, I'm a banished like prince.
He's trying to get back, and he's like, well, and then it does get a little jumbled with like the anti-life equation. It's like, well, the anti-life equation is on this planet, and it's like. okay, like I guess that was supposed to be in your next movie, but
Yep.
all
right,
yeah,
but like the idea that he's not really the big bad. It's kind of like how in Avengers you had Loki, who was the villain, but he wasn't like the villain. You knew he was working for someone.
yeah,
That's how we're supposed to Steppenwolf. Like, yeah, the big bad's not gonna show up this quickly. He's gonna send his own guys there to try to see if they can do it on their own. If he has to step in, then he will eventually. But that's why I like that. I like Steppenwolf.
yeah. I think
this one's way more menacing. I thought he was more scary, like in this one. Where in the first one he just looked like an old grandpa wearing armor.
Now I don't know a lot about special or CGI or visual effects, but I do think that part of the reason why the version that we got in Whedon looks the way it does, and the version we got in the Snyder version looks the way it does, is I think Snyder, if you watch BVS, you actually do see this version of Steppenwolf in the Ultimate Cut.
Yeah,
it's in the Ultimate Cut. It's not in the.
I watched the Ultimate Cut like the weekend before.
If you watch it, you're like, that's what it was going to look like. But I think what it came down to is the cost of rendering out the character, because
all that
if you look
armor movement and stuff like that.
Because the other one, it's like it's a very simple, flat looking character who's like he's got his face, a helmet, and like all this like very basic armor, and it's like it's probably really easy to animate. On the other hand, the Snyder version, it's like visually, it's like, okay, we got all these sharp edges, and like it's reflective, and like the whole thing like comes off of his body, and which looks really cool, and it's like alien and stuff. And then you get that cool moment where like the Amazonians are shooting arrows at him, and they get in there, and then he just like his armor just goes
and they shoot them all out.
And it's like you can't do that with the other version, so it's like it really does look like a cost-cutting thing when you got the Whedon version versus the Snyder version.
Was like what it was. I assume that it was just rushed.
So when you say so Charlie, when you say like the Snyder cut looks like it was, I think the Whedon cut to me looks like it was done by committee. More than the Snyder cut does. I think the Snyder cut is
sure.
And I think and when
are you talking overall, or are you talking like okay, here's my interpretation. My interpretation is this. We have this whole thing. We don't have Zack. We're in panic mode. We just need to get this out. And so if it's me going in there, like putting myself in the shoes of Joss Whedon, it's like I would have fun. I mean, I'm the guy who makes fan edits. I'm the guy who's just like, oh, this will be fun. You need it. Oh, you need it cut in half. Okay, here's what we do. We'll save an hour if we just have a stupid scene with Batman where a parademon explodes and just magically shows all the mother boxes. And that's like a bad example because that's stupid. But like the fun part, like I would have fun getting in there and being like, too long, remove it, get rid of it. Superfluous, like get rid of, and the tragedy, as we said,
but you
is
see that
like Steppenwolf is like you actually do kind of understand and maybe feel bad for Steppenwolf here and there in this cut, but like you completely understand that it's like, okay, we could have all this Steppenwolf stuff, but not only does that take up a lot of screen time, but we also have to animate all that.
No, that's what I was just saying.
We don't have time. We have to get this movie out in a week.
That's exactly what I was just saying.
And just animate it like to be like just quick.
That's exactly what I was saying to Jeff, is that it looks like the Whedon version is like it's the cost-cutting version of the Snyder cut version. Because I was just explaining to him.
I would say practical.
It's practical. It's like, no, I think it's cost-cutting in the fact that like the other version is just very flat. It's like, okay, he's got the shape. He's we can animate the mouth. We can animate his movement. We do the motion capture. But then when you look at the Snyder version, it's like he's got blades on every part of his body. He's shining surfaces. He's reflective, which means we're going to have to deal with the lighting a little bit. Every time he moves, every little piece is going to we're going to have to animate every little piece. It's going to take longer to render.
Geez, McCurdy, we have 2 weeks to get this movie in theaters. Like, we don't have time.
No, we can't do that.
We don't have time.
Yeah. Here's the flat version. Here's another version we throw out.
The committee was going, end of the world. We don't have. We literally don't have time.
And then to add to that,
they dug themselves.
To add to that, it's like, okay, so we're doing this movie. Okay, the dark side thing is just too confusing because we got 2 more characters, and this is a big bad. But you said we were going to do a second movie, but now we've changed our plans. We're just going to do this one movie, and then if this does well, we'll maybe go in a different direction and do the Legion of Doom. So let's not introduce Dark Side. Let's just don't do Dark Side. And now we've taken the whole motivation that made the Snyder version really work, was that he's like trying to get back to his home, and like Darkseid's this other character that they would probably get to face off with in another movie down the road, which I think would have been cool.
That's
but then again, it's like
stuff,
all that nightmare stuff, all this stuff that they set up would have been done that.
Wait. Is none of that happening? Or all these Batman premonitions for nothing?
So far, but there's no plans to continue this storyline.
So this is just like I keep saying.
Good. Cut your losses.
This is literally just like Snyder constantly telling you.
5 years. Reset it.
This is the what could have been, and it's like, and also to add to what I was talking about earlier about how this cut of the movie is like, here's 4-hour version. Like, let me throw in everything we didn't get. It's like they shot extra footage that they did not originally have as a Snyder cut, and all of that's the very end of the movie. That is probably the first scene you're going to cut out, with Jared Leto as the Joker talking to Batman, and Batman being like, "I'm going to fucking kill you," and you're like, "Okay."
They kept hiding him. They just kept hiding. It's like they kept.
Well, they
only
did
used that one shot where they just keep hiding him.
No, they did. They did it. The reason they did, well, it was a cost cutting thing, but they did it because they couldn't get their schedules to match. So they were like, okay, one take. We'll do this and then make it look weird and like artsy.
Like,
and it's also the thing that you've been saying this whole time is like,
hide him.
We're gonna do the artsy thing. So this is like these 2 greats and they're against each other in the motions. And look at the camera angle that I used.
But everything they're saying is just empty. It's just empty. Like it's supposed to have this like,
I can't remember at all
it's the
what
Joker, and
said.
I'm like,
I can't tell you what he said at all. I don't remember at all. Still,
exactly.
I didn't care.
What I remember is Batman basically saying that Harley Quinn died, and she said on her grave that I need to kill the Joker, and so I will make that promise, and I am going to kill you. Believe me, I will kill you. And that's what I took out of that scene. So I was like,
I didn't even realize that he was talking about Harley Quinn. I was like, who's he?
That's what I got out of it.
I thought he was talking about Robin, because I knew that like he had killed Robin or whatever. Like
I think he's trying to. I think Joker kind of throws that in him, like throws him at him, like, oh yeah, you had people that you used to work with, and where are they at now, like kind of thing. Yeah. But
well, like I said, that's exactly what I said about Suicide Squad. Is just like everybody so badly wanted to like it because it had the Joker, and I'm like, sorry guys, this isn't the Joker you love. It's a different one, and this different one has to prove himself. And I do think that Jared Leto got robbed. I think that he probably I'm sure there's a Suicide Squad Snyder.
There is Error had a. They're not working on it, but Error basically even came out after this came out and was
that's
like,
what I'm saying. That's what I'm
they
saying.
were like basically for the same reason why Justice League
that.
changed. For the same reason Justice League.
I know. They do that with all these movies. Like I get it. What I'm saying is that every one of these movies has a better version out there that is untouched by these idiots who are running the show. Again,
which is weird because we're talking about the Fountainhead, and that's kind of what the Fountainhead was about, right?
It's
like
very,
like,
it's
ironically, it's kind of what he's about.
Is Atlas, and like Atlas Shrugged. I get it, but
and you're like,
but all in all, it's like, ooh, you all like the Joker, right? And I just groaned when I saw him, because I was like, oh, here we go. Yep. We're gonna get something stupid, and guess what we got? We got something stupid and meaningless, and it's just like, and that's what I'm saying is where like Joss Whedon comes in and he's like, that's stupid and meaningless. That's stupid and meaningless. Let's just, and that's what I mean by when I went and saw Justice League and I walked out and I had nothing. I was like, I'm numb. I was like, I would prefer that to watching something that repeatedly, time and again, makes me hate it. And let me tell you the one thing about both versions that I want to grab and murder. Let's have fun with this game too. What's the one thing in both versions that I want to grab by the throat and squeeze until the eyes pop out? Go ahead.
They're in both of them?
That's in both. Should be very obvious. I'm hoping.
Oh, crap.
I'll simplify it as a character. It's one character.
The Flash.
Who just Barry Allen is just the worst.
I think that's very much Ezra Miller
casting. It's the casting was such a bummer, and I'm assuming it was Zack Snyder who decided to go with like let's try to make this person funny. Who is like that and that I've seen that actor in other things, and I'm like, yeah, he's fine, whatever. Yeah. He's not funny in the least, and he's like it's extremely forced, and what it comes down to is he becomes Jar Jar Binks, where it's like every single frame that he's in, he needs to be doing something stupid for laughs. But it's
like the red letter media Ghostbusters argument with like, you know, there's a producer standing over, you know, it's like they need to be saying something. He needs to say something, you know.
It's supposed to be funny.
They're trying to make the Flash be like Robert Downey Jr. and the Iron Man Avengers stuff, where it's like Robert Downey Jr. would have kind of little fun quips and stuff like that and jokes. But a lot of times you had Robert Downey Jr. just being himself.
Or like Spider-Man. Like
Spider-Man,
I interpret it more with like,
hey, whoa, this is the Batcave. Ooh, wow. Yeah. Oh, hey, can I touch that? Hey, kid, don't touch that. Like,
I looked at it more like from the Justice League cartoon, which again, I think it's so weird that Warner Brothers was like, you had this thing that fans loved, which was the animated series, and you could have used it as a template and maybe even brought in one of the writers to make this who wrote the video games that are super popular, but you didn't do that. And then, but in that version, you know, Flash is Barry Allen, or it's actually Wally West.
It's Wally West in the animated
Wally West,
series.
but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That was like, he was the comedic one on that show. He was the lighthearted, funny one in the group.
That's not my point. My point isn't that like he shouldn't be funny. Somebody's got to be the comic relief. My point is that his delivery of everything is desperate and awful. And
I'm just pointing out
makes me hate him. He becomes Jar Jar Binks
when they were trying to do that.
He does every time he's in the shot. He doesn't need to be undermining what we're trying to do. Like every time he opens his mouth, he undermines. Like even from the get go, I love his moment of realization that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Phenomenal. Yeah. Great job. And then he opens his mouth and he's like, stop right there. I'm in. And it's like not every moment of grandiose has to be completely because obviously what they're going, it's like, I'm Batman and I'm trying to bring together a team and this team's going to be really important and stuff. And then he's like, stop right there. I'm totally down. His delivery of everything is trying so hard to make me laugh, and it makes me hate him.
I think for me though, I think that's one of the things I didn't like about the Whedon cut of it is Whedon's trying to use of making the humor
I don't think it's Whedon though. It's not Whedon.
No, that's definitely Whedon.
Then are you saying that Joss Whedon's recuts got into the Snyder cut?
Specifically, not the Snyder cut. I'm talking about the Whedon cut.
But all of Barry Allen stuff is the same in both versions. Both versions.
Back up. Let's go back to the timeline, right? So, Batman v Superman comes out. It's not a success.
Dude, we keep going into background stuff. And we're not talking about the movie. Let's talk about the movie.
You got to steamroll and talk about it forever. Let me finish.
We're talking about the movies, not about behind the scenes stuff. Dude, I don't care about behind the scenes stuff.
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
What I was talking about.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Give him a pass. Go ahead, give him a pass.
Great.
Well, if you would have read this comic, if you knew this behind the scenes thing, I don't care about that shit.
That's great.
I care about the movie itself.
Great. But what I was talking about is that it was apparent at one point in time that the critics or the press or whatever got a chance to see this movie when Zack Snyder was still helming it. And they even had commented back then, they were like, oh, this seems a little bit lighthearted. Like they're getting the notes that we need to make this funny. And it seemed to me, at least, that it was like Zack Snyder and team were like, okay, we got the note from the studio. We have to make this funny. How do we do this? And they're like, oh, we have the Flash. We'll just give all the funny things to the Flash. And then I think when Whedon took over, it was like amped up to 11 as far as the humor things. It's just something I'm not really like.
But did that bleed into the Snyder Cut?
Not in the Snyder Cut, but you can see
that's what I'm saying. But
what
they're
I'm
all
pointing
the same.
out.
It's the same shit from one version to the next. So it's not Joss Whedon. It's because
what I was getting with Joss Whedon
okay,
stuff.
no, listen. Joss Whedon's touch was, when it comes to comedy, was brilliant moves. Like suddenly the guy who's been dark and brooding the whole time, aka Aquaman, suddenly starts talking a lot. And you're like, why is he talking a lot? What's going on? Oh, he sat on the lasso of truth or whatever.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's pure Joss Whedon. The fact that that's not in the Snyder Cut, again, just shows me that Joss Whedon brought some good stuff to this, some like humanity to it.
Zack Snyder himself has never been known to have like very much humor stuff in his things.
And that's
when they are, they're never like quite landing as anything else we watch. And that's why that's why like that scene with Batman first meeting Flash, it just feels off because that's still like when Zack Snyder, none of the footage in the Zack Snyder Cut was done by Joss Whedon. It's all Zack Snyder.
That's what I'm saying.
So all the lines and all the dialogues of Flash was done.
What I was going to get at though, and something I don't necessarily like about Whedon's version is like the moment with the lasso of truth and Aquaman and all that stuff. That's great. That's good stuff.
It's a highlight.
But I don't think every single thing that Whedon added to make it humorous or more humorous or lighten the tone for me totally worked. Like undercutting every little scene with Batman, I thought like after a while I was like, this isn't working for me. Like every little scene, it's like, okay, well, how do we undercut Batman? Oh, we'll just do the scene where he was like, oh, that's gonna bleed. And it's like, okay, great, get it. And then we get to a later scene where he gets into it with Aquaman, and he's like, oh no, and I'm like, that it's just kind of robs the
Tell
character.
me again. Are you talking about Snyder, or are you talking?
I am talking about the Whedon theatrical cut. I'm just saying this is something that, as much as I agree with you that like Whedon does bring some good stuff, and you can understand that he understands the characters, at least from a comic book sense, or even like trying to give them more substance. There are some choices that he makes that I'm like, I don't really necessarily like that choice, like trying to throw more humor into Batman, that I'm like,
but here's my point. Batman, I'll give you Batman. But what I'm saying specifically is that my number one question going into the Snyder Cut is Barry Allen still going to be an insufferable piece of shit? And they didn't cut any of that stuff. In fact, there was a significantly larger amount of Barry Allen being an obnoxious cunt that I can't stomach. And that's probably at the heart of my disdain for both of these movies, is Barry Allen himself. I would rather the Snyder Cut, I wish, was Snyder's original version of Barry Allen, aka the Flash, just being the Flash and not being obnoxious. But they completely made him Jar Jar Binks, having him be as obnoxious as possible. Every frame that he's in, he's doing something stupid. And I mean, there's maybe like, I like when he realizes that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and you
don't like anything else with him. But that was just, I was getting to the point that
he also also to get back to Zack Snyder, like Zack Snyder's like, okay, we have to throw in this scene where he's eating a lot. By the way, Sam Deddens just came in. Sam makes all of our thumbnails. So
cool.
Hey, Sam. Anyway.
Hi.
So what was my point? What was I talking about? We're talking about how I'm trying to find the other moment where I like Barry Allen, and I'm not finding it. But
it's unfortunate because for me, the Flash is my favorite DC character. Of like,
you must hate this. You must hate.
So
all
it frustrates me, because he is supposed. I always wrote him because he is supposed to be a lot more lighthearted than the other ones. He's also the one superhero. He only has one power. I can go really fast. So he tries to figure out how to use that power in different ways. So like creating tornadoes, or vibrating through walls, or creating lightning to throw at people. you know, it's use the Speed Force. That you want to get the details.
There's a lot of cool stuff that the Flash can do, and they
can
definitely
do with
dive
the idea
into it
that
in
he can only
the TV show.
Whereas, like, it's not like Superman, where he's like, I have laser beams, I have ice breath, I can fly, I have super strength.
Yeah.
It's like for Flash, he has only one power really, and it's to move really fast, and he uses it in different ways, or like the time travel. That's why I always liked him. He's interesting in that way, and that. Because like Batman, you always got he's like dark story. Like Barry Allen is just like he's Barry Allen. I always like the Wally West one because he's the one that he's the more comic one. Barry Allen was more like the typical I'm a straight man superhero. Wally West, who was Kid Flash, who becomes the Flash, was the more comical. So that's why this version is kind of like a weird mix mash of them.
No, and then going back to Charlie's point, it basically comes down to I think Ezra Miller was a bad choice. I think Ezra Miller was personally a bad choice for this character.
I would like
as well as some other characters. It's like let's
make him Robin. I could see him as Robin and not being funny at all, but being like serious if you had to use him. But suddenly forcing him, like I get what you're saying, that it's like, oh, okay, this isn't working out. So Ezra, we need you to be funny. And he's like, I've never been funny in my life. And it's like, well, you can do it. And then he falls on his face. But my point with Snyder, the point I was trying to make before, is that Snyder, again, he doesn't think deeply about these things. He just thinks on like the visual superficial level, which is good when it comes to the visuals, but bad for everything else. So like they have the scene after we establish, Flash and Batman, where he's like, he suddenly just has a pizza and he's eating the pizza and he's explaining that he has to always be eating because he's got this hyper metabolism. And then that's it. Like, again, to my point, Snyder's like, good enough. Like we threw that into the lore and that's all we need. But
that could have been a setup and payoff is what you're saying.
I'm saying he should have been eating the whole time. And yes, it should have been paid off at some point. Like he should have been like Brad Pitt in every movie that Brad Pitt's in. He's just eating the whole time. But instead, it's like, good enough. We established it. It's part of the lore. We're done. And that's what I mean.
Then they could have like they
good enough. Oh, this person has mommy daddy issues. We had him say like, oh, fuck you, dad. Good enough. Like everything is just like, whatever. Move on. And that's where I say it's like it's profound if you're an idiot. If you're an idiot, you're like, he said faith. Faith is profound. This movie is profound. It's like, no, this movie tried to be profound, but I honestly wish that in the end, I wish that they would have just gone, like they want to go dark, stark, and depressing with superheroes. Fantastic. I'm there. That's my shit. That's my cup of tea. I wish they would have gone further. Like even the visuals are cartoonish. Like even like Darkseid and all these bad guys, like they undermine this whole dark. Like imagine Darkseid and company being in the Dark Knight series. You just can't, because those movies have a certain amount of class by avoiding massive amounts of CGI. Oh wait, we're going to do the same thing with this like massive franchise. We're going to try to replicate that tone, but then we're going to bring in this crazy amount of CGI, and it just, none of it works. Like none of it works, and I just don't feel compelled to ever watch any of these movies again.
It's sad because Zack Snyder already got his really dark superhero stuff by doing Watchmen. Like Watchmen is about as dark as I get with the superhero stuff. Like that, now it's like he got it. So why is he trying to do the exact same thing again?
I think it just comes. I think that comes down to like that's his MO. Like he's like, well, this is how I see things, and this is what I want to put in these movies, and this is how. This is my vision for this thing. And so he just continuously does that. And then I did read in an article at some point, and this is like kind of the same bit where they were like, where it kind of revealed that, this Barry Allen humor stuff was there before Whedon. But basically
I'm saying
like, hey,
I believe that. I believe that because I'm not talking about Snyder Cut.
Okay, you're drunk. I wasn't talking about that. You're drunk, bro. You need to calm down.
No, I'm not.
You're drunk.
What
I'm saying though, it's that they acknowledge that they get the note. We're too dark. We need to light things up. This is the longest
ranked episode. I can't even see my timer. Kevin, we're just going until we drop, bro. I got enough beer to last me all night. Sorry I cut you off, McCurdy. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. This is not the longest episode by far.
Should we call it okay, Kevin?
We are
should
2
we call
hours
it,
and
should we
18
call
minutes
it
in.
mini ranked, or should we call it like ranked one-offs? Because
Yeah,
like
ranked
we
one-off
don't
sounds
we're
better.
not only gonna ever just be doing bonds. We're gonna
You
expand
can change
into
the
other
title
stuff,
of this,
but-
right? You can change
For
the
sure.
title of this.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's undecided. We're still trying to figure it out.
Just call it Ranked Justice League.
Let's call him Kevin Arnold
Just call it Ranked.
Hours.
Just call the episode Ranked
He likes
Justice
one
League
okay, cool.
versus Zack Snyder. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, I like whatever. The playlist name will be ranked one-offs, because like we'll have one-offs like this in the future where because we've talked about how are we going to do trilogies? Let's just have a one-off. No need to do 3 episodes of a trilogy. Just one sit-down discussion. And if it's 6 hours long, who cares? Kevin can go take a dump in the middle of it, you know?
Well, if that's an issue that people are having listening to podcasts, I tell them you haven't watched enough podcasts and you don't understand the point of a podcast. That is my personal view. It's not a 30-minute thing. It's a thing you do when you're driving someplace, going from one place to the other.
Yeah. I have another example about Snyder versus Whedon. Did we cut you off midpoint? Do you still have a point to make?
I'd like to wrap things up if it's because I think you've made your point fairly clear, and it goes back to 2 things. Basically, what was in your opening statement was basically that Snyder does moments, he doesn't do scenes. He wants to crank everything to up 11, but there's no substance to really.
Yeah, but you're stealing that from
points.
the nerd writer. I don't care about the whole moments thing. What it comes down to for me,
it's exactly what you're talking about.
Snyder,
as far as
Snyder is like my take on that. If I have a take on what you said, to somewhat reiterate, is that Snyder is, like I said, he's like Michael. The older he gets, he's more like Michael Bay.
I agree.
It's like bring in, and what I'm about to say is exactly what I always say about Michael Bay. Hey, bring in Michael, bring in Zach to shoot this action scene, and hopefully that it has something that's carrying us through the scene that we care about. But otherwise, we're shooting in a scene that requires subtlety and human emotion. Okay, you go take lunch. Bring in Chris. Bring in some like the way I put it for Michael Bay is that a lot of times you'll have like these more emotional directors who they'll bring in a specialist to shoot an action scene because they're like, whatever, just make the action scene. Michael Bay and Zack Snyder need the opposite. They need somebody with human emotion to come in, like, hey, like come in and shoot this important dialogue scene that requires subtlety, and I'm going to go take a dump, right? And then that would be phenomenal. Like we talked about, like if only Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder could co-direct this, and it's like one does the visualization and shoots it and the action and all that, and then the other one does the more subtle moments, and then boom, we might have like the greatest thing ever. But
the best example of that is Empire Strikes Back. You have Irving Kershner coming in doing all the like more moments, and then while George Lucas gets to go fund all the special effects scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the best example of that.
Match made in heaven, and like put their egos aside and focus on the long term, and it'd be phenomenal. But like case in point, there's one very subtle moment, like really subtle. Sam Dedden says, "Yeah, go take a dump, Kevin." What you got to say about that, Kevin? There's one moment where it's when Wonder Woman is sitting at the computer and she's saying, or she's like looking into Cyborg, right? And then the screen gets all fuzzy, right? And in the original cut, Alfred's like, oh yeah, this footage usually gets like this, and then she's saying something, and then suddenly like Matrix style, like knock knock Neo, words start appearing on the screen. And she has a quick little conversation with Cyborg where he's like, why are you looking for me? And she's like, I want to talk to you. And he's like, fuck off. In the Zack Snyder version, it's just, hey, meet me here. That speaks volumes. Where for the millionth time, Zack Snyder's just like, oh, they want to meet up. Good enough. He doesn't think any deeper than that this character would probably first question the whole, like, why does she want to talk to me? And he would probably just tell her to buzz off first until she had like, she said the right thing or whatever, where he would maybe entertain the idea of meeting up. But overall, Zack Snyder doesn't think about any of that. He just says, and then they meet, and like the script says they meet up. So they just meet up. Then when in the Snyder version, when they do meet up, he flies in and he's like, why are you looking for me? And she's like, I'm looking for you because I want you to join a team. And he just goes, he literally says, she's like, we need to save the world. And he's like, fuck the world. And he goes to fly off. It's like Joss Whedon saw that moment and went, no. He would have done that through the screen. He would have told her to fuck off through the screen. And then if she said the right thing, then he would meet up. It's like Joss Whedon understands how humans work, and he applies that to his filmmaking, where Zack Snyder's whole philosophy about filmmaking is, well, I don't know. Was it cool? Does it look cool? Is it cool? It should be badass and cool. And that's where I just say, oh, they just picked the wrong guy. And then and it just all that's why it's fascinating to see these two versions, because you had somebody come in who understands character, and yes, he put band-aids on everything, but to get back to this, I honestly think that the theatrical cut is superior in that sense, that it just gets rid of all this, like, this stuff that's trying to be grandiose, and it just cuts to like what the movie needs, and it doesn't make me want to cut my own head off, because it's like it leaves all that ham-fisted stuff in the dark. And I know you want to wrap this up, so if you do me the decency of letting me just like run through my final stuff, like, speaking of we never got around to the mommy daddy issues of Victor Stone, where Victor Stone is like Vision, right? He is the Vision of this movie, where he's like, Vision's whatever. He's got the Mind Stone and all that. But like Cyborg, his dad lays out the whole thing about, we are, you with a thought, you could send all the nukes into the sky, and you could hack anything. And, and that's where, that alone, pointing that out alone makes me go, yeah, but if he suddenly had that, like, no, wait, not exactly the Vision, more like Ultron. He's more like Ultron. He's more like if Ultron didn't immediately become evil, because the whole thing with Ultron was he immediately had all this knowledge, and he came to the conclusion that, like, how do you protect humanity? Well, you might have to destroy humanity to protect them from themselves. Like, that was the conclusion he came to, which is very machine-like. But Cyborg, he's still clinging to this, like, well, mom would be alive if you would have shown up to my football game and all that. And it's like, would he really be concerned with any of his human anything if he suddenly had access to like all the knowledge in the world? Like, I just don't. And again, that's where I just go, Zack Snyder doesn't understand what's going on in the heads of any of these characters. And it's just like, what's emotional? Daddy issues is emotional, so I'm just going to have him hate his dad, even though, like, he would just be on another, like, and my fix for that would be that the guilt that was going on in the head of Victor Stone should have all been given to the dad. The dad is the one who should have had, like, he should have had like daddy issues, where he's full of regret, and he's the one saying, if only I would have been at that game, maybe it would have been different. And then Victor's like, no, dad, none of that matters anymore. And he's like, no, really, son, you wouldn't be this monster. And he's like, I'm not a monster. Like, that would have made more sense and probably had more emotional weight than this ham-fisted subplot with the mom and him, and this forced mommy daddy issues. Again, everybody has forced mommy daddy issues that ultimately don't mean anything. That's catharsis, bitch. For me, at least. You know what I'm saying, though? Like, if Victor, all of that angst where he's just like, my dad's a meanie head and a douchebag, all of that should have been inside of Professor Stone. And the catharsis should have come from him, like, his acceptance, rather than Victor coming around to that. And I don't know shit about comic books or any of that, but
I will say
would have made more sense.
I will say this. I see your take on it, but I will say that, like, I think there's even a line in the movie where he's like, I have a voice in my head that I don't understand. Like, and I think there could be, like, I still think there's like
very much
this,
like Division. It's very much
it's like
Division. Yeah.
there's this whole thing where it's like, okay, I've got this machine side of my body, and then I have all my human emotions and thoughts and stuff, but then there's this other side of me that it's like I can access all this crazy stuff. Like,
yeah,
that could be compelling, and I just don't think the movie, you know, does it justice, as you would say. Like, not, no pun intended, but like, it doesn't do that justice. But what you're pitching is like, with what it has to offer, you could go your route and it make more sense. So
he should have, like, he just should, like, the moment you're this superhuman, you know, you just wouldn't have these human concerns anymore. And maybe Dad still would or whatever. And
I don't know.
Like,
I'm
not saying he like immediately has to be a robot or whatever, but but I'm saying like, I'm saying that it was just like this constant like F you, Dad, that just was the same brand of Zack Snyder reaching for some kind of I mean, what does it all mean? The fact that everybody has mommy daddy issues, I get that that's the theme, but what was the overall payoff of that? Was there some kind of like meta theme that was meant to tie all of that together? Like, oh, Batman is everybody's daddy and Wonder Woman is everybody's mommy, and they were fighting with them just like they were fighting, like something profound. Yeah. But no, it's all just vagaries that are meant to trick you into thinking this movie's smarter than it is. And it's just not, because it's all ham-fisted garbage. And again, that's why I just go, this movie was better. This movie was better. This movie sucks, but it was better. It at least, like, I mean, I might actually claim that the fact that it was shorter was an improvement, because all the stuff they added to Snyder was like, it's profound, isn't it? It's so profound. Sorry, I'll keep going through my crap because I know we haven't talked like specifically a lot about the movies themselves. But like going through, like, I think I laughed. I think I actually peed in the theater. Like I pissed my pants when they're fighting Superman, and suddenly they're like, wait, guys, where's the mother box? And Steppenwolf zips down and he's like, ha 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 ha, and he just zips off with it. Like, they just all forgot to watch this. The one thing they had to do was protect the mother box, and they didn't. And he just like zips off with it. Like, and I'm glad that they somewhat fixed that in this. I mean, obviously it was like they say
in the Snyder cut or in
in the theatrical.
Yeah, he like comes down, he grabs it.
It's hilarious.
And then in the Snyder cut, it's like, at least it gives a little more story crap to it, where it's like, oh, well, his dad died because, and that stuff's set up. But yeah, you're right. It's like, they killed his dad. Why do we have to kill the Terminator guy again? Like,
just to heat it up, just to heat up the box, he had to kill himself.
It was something like, that is a step. Like, that's the thing about that. Like, that is set up in the movie. Like, they do set that up.
They do.
Well,
they do. But
it's like we
just
have
get out of the box.
We have this laser that we got from Krypton that heats things up. We established that, like, Barry says something like, well, why don't we just burn the thing? And they're like, well, we can't burn it because it just absorbs heat. And then you get to that final point where he just like heats the box up and absorbs all the heat. And you're like, that's how they find where Steppenwolf's at, that's how they find the box. So it's like, that was all there. It works. It works better, I think, in the Snyder cut. And it's hilarious in the theatrical.
It's embarrassing in the theatrical. And it's like the fact that it's like, okay, we can either embarrass ourselves horribly, or we can, because I still think that him heating it up, it's like, okay, I guess it works. I guess he had to kill himself. I guess he had to get into that box. Even though I think he reacted it, or he activated it remotely. I guess he had, whatever. I can give that a pass, but it is still part of this like mommy daddy thing that just doesn't work. Like but anyway, when it comes to
it could have been something else, where like he had the laser and he actually tries to use it on Steppenwolf, and then Steppenwolf is able to kill him, and then you still
like personally kill him.
So you still have that moment. It's like I'm going to get Steppenwolf because he killed me. Yeah, he killed my dad.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, and then, you know, and now I feel bad for all the things I've said to you, Dad, now that you're dead and I didn't realize. And you know, like there's all of that.
It's almost
they
like
could have done it that
motivation
way.
is important, and Snyder
Wonder.
doesn't understand human motivation. Anyway, so then so there's also like random questions I have. So it's like Steppenwolf is like the box summoned me, like he like the box was awoken and it summoned him, so he came. There's also the whole thing about like we're looking for the anti-life equation, which is supposedly written on Earth, and he's like, I found the equation, but like, isn't that what Doom Man wrote on the, like he slammed his thing down and it like wrote the
I don't think the movie
equation,
does it. It doesn't
and then
do it
they
favors. It's kind
they're
of
like,
comic
we forgot that it was on Earth, and it's like, how did you forget where you
Yeah.
wrote it? And it's like, it's the only planet to ever have fought back. Wouldn't you remember everything about that incident if it was literally the only planet to ever fight back? We lost the equation, but then we found it again. Why? Wait, but once you write it down, you don't remember it, or you didn't write it down on a little piece of paper and put it in your pocket? Like, none of that shit makes any sense. And I know you're going to be like, well, comic book A and comic book B, but like for me, none of that makes any sense.
No,
And
like I'm going to say
what I'm
going to say to you. What I'm going to say to you is that like
the anti-life equation
comics, in the comic, it's like this. You could say in the comics, right? But like the biggest difference between these Marvel films and the DC films is that Marvel understands, and they've always understood this even when they're writing the books, is that you have new fans that come into these things all the time, and you have to kind of re-explain things. What DC just kind of does is just like, okay, here's this thing that's in the comics. You're supposed to understand it. Black suit Superman, Doomsday, who's in BVS, Themyscira, all this like things that you're supposed to kind of vaguely understand. But like when you see a Marvel film, they kind of take what was in the comics and then they reinterpret it to make it work and to explain it to the audience. So we're not like, wait, what? Like that was, what was it? Huh? Like you don't need the extra material to understand it. So like the anti-life equation
in that process,
could have been,
they make it more clever. They make it better when they do that, as opposed to you have all these fanboys who are like, well, in the comics it does
exactly.
It's like,
So
it's like I understand like you have all this knowledge I don't have, but it's also like we talked about with The Martian. The Martian stuff is not clever because it's relying on these fanboys with pre-established knowledge.
Like I know who Martian
it makes for lazy,
is.
but it makes, my point being that it makes for lazy filmmaking, as opposed to them doing something clever within this new medium to make everybody happy. They simply take something from the comics and they realize it in the same way that like a YouTube video could do that. Somebody on YouTube could just make a fan film for The Martian and everybody be like, hey, look, it's real. It's real. But instead they get a big boner because suddenly they have this real world, iteration of something that they love. And I understand that on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, it's not clever. And in fact, it makes the material worse.
When this movie is like, the key is Lois Lane. I think the key to making a better Justice League movie would have been Martian Manhunter all along, because you could have had a character that you establish, you create this back storyline. He's like, I was on Mars.
Guy.
You know, he's the general guy.
Is that the general from? Is that him from Man of Steel?
Man of Steel,
absolutely.
They could have had this whole story arc where it was like, no, I have been living on this planet for thousands of years. I was there when Steppenwolf was here. He destroyed my people on Mars, and we need, and like he's coming, and I know all this stuff is happening. And then convinces Batman and convinces Wonder Woman, everybody, and they all come together. And instead of it being like Batman's like, I gotta do this to Superman. It's like, no, why not? Why don't you have Martian Manhunter convince, and not have Superman dead, but have him trying to convince Batman and Superman and the Flash and all these DC characters, and be like, no, you guys don't understand. He's coming, and make him the expositional character whose like mission it is to form the Justice League. How much of a better movie I think that would have been.
You just described the animated series. Like,
dude,
would have been better.
He was
it
like
the
reason that they got to get the
would have been better. Would have worked.
It's so much better.
Who knew? So
and that's
I'm
that's
gonna concede.
but instead what we have are like we have like sorry, going back into things that don't make sense. So you have in this movie in the Snyder cut, you have this moment where Batman's like, I had this moment. It was almost like a premonition where Barry Allen came through and he told me that Lois is the key. And that's what's so weird is that was not a premonition. That was actually something that happened. But then meanwhile, Batman does have premonitions. He has these dreams about what's to come. And I get now that like they keep adding to that. And it's like at some point Superman is going to kill everybody or whatever. But it's like on one hand, he's talking about premonitions. And then on the other, he actually is having premonitions that he's just like not telling anybody or whatever, but they're kind of intermixed where it's like he knows that Lois is going to die, but he's not doing anything about it because like on one hand it's a premonition that is a premonition, and on the other hand it's a premonition that's not, and it's eventually you just go, it's a mess. None of this makes sense, and it's a fucking mess, and it's as simple as that. They just didn't, like, Zack Snyder's preoccupation is, well, is it cool? Batman running through the desert in a suit is cool. I don't know what it means, but it's badass.
Well, okay, I'll stop you there. And you're going to hate me. And it's not it's in the comics thing. It's just, this was the plan all along kind of thing, because they were going to do a part 2. The idea was that they were going to do this whole thing and they were going to fail, and somehow Lois Lane was going to get killed. Superman was going to become evil. And then basically they were going to do a movie essentially where you get kind of what is at the end of this movie.
But just do that without all these stupid ass premonitions.
And the
just
idea was that like they were going to have that bit, and then the Flash at some point in that movie was going to go back in time. So then it's oh, it all makes sense now.
Like,
you know?
I can add all that together. Like 2 + 2 + what equals 6? 2. I can add it all up to what they were trying to do.
But
what I'm saying is that it's obnoxious.
Oh, I know.
Just doesn't work.
So like in Back to the Future, I'm going to use this example because like the first Back to the Future movie is great. And then they get to the second movie like, oh, we have this opportunity to go back to the first movie because that was part of the plot. So then they have this idea where like, oh, well, he has to go back, and we go back to scenes in the first movie, and things happen that from different angles, we see things from a different point of view, and that's cool. Oh, they could have done that. They could have done that with this movie where they were like, we're going to do that, but we don't need to do the premonition stuff. Like, let's save that to the later movie.
Exactly.
You know?
That's what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
And again, Zack Snyder's like, I'm doing something profound, but it undermines what he's trying to do. It's like, do that, like go make that movie. And that would have been them all running around in the desert is cool. It's not cool doing that early on where it's like, what is this? This is
having a contest.
This is a premonition, but it's not. But like, we're supposed to take it seriously, but it's a dream. Like, what the hell?
Like, I kind of want to see that movie over profound. This movie. You know,
it's fascinating.
Not because
he teams up with the Joker to kill Superman. That's awesome. But instead, we just get emptiness. It's just none of it means anything.
Yeah.
And that's what's so insulting is they gave all like that again. That's where it's like Christopher Nolan's heading this up. Christopher Nolan's on vacation the whole time they're making these movies. He's just counting paychecks and not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that how Warner Brothers put all this on Zack Snyder to create their universe. Because they got different directors for different Marvel movies throughout. But yet they're like, Zack Snyder, you're going to do 3 of the big movies for us. Like, you're going to do Man of Steel, then Batman vs. Superman, then Justice League Part 1 and 2. And then they wanted other movies to kind of branch from his template. Like Suicide Squad was trying to be like his style. And then even Wonder Woman tried, like, what kind of has that feel, but at least got its own.
You get a director in Wonder Woman that like understands how character motivations work.
Yes.
You know, you get somebody, but this comes back to what I said way back in the beginning of this, was that one of the things I get frustrated with is people talking about DC movies and they're always being dark. And I'm like, no, it's because you have bad seed that planted this plant of all these movies, and they're going off of the first couple films by this one guy that shouldn't have been hired in the first place as like the visionary for this whole thing. Should not have been down to like, hey, Zach, let's hire Ezra Miller for Barry Allen. He's quirky, you know, like they should have
it's
just
the same
not
exact
done that.
thing. How like what you had over on the Star Wars end of things is you had like, ooh, let's bring in J.J. Abrams and he'll do for Star Wars what he did for Star Trek. And at the time, everybody goes, fantastic. That's a great choice. And then in hindsight, you go, oh, wow, maybe, you know, like little does everybody know is that there's this sleeper hit in Mandalorian, which accurately hit those old school vibes of Star Wars. And everybody goes, oh, maybe the guy who jump-started Marvel with Iron Man should have been the guy to jumpstart our new Star Wars.
And on top of that,
only in hindsight could we come to that.
But on top of that, not only do you get the guy who helped start MCU, he knew to collaborate with a guy who made a very hit TV show with fans around the same subject by getting Dave Filoni, who did Clone Wars. They could have done that with Warner Brothers. Got a guy to good jumpstart, but trust people who know how to work the characters. So get people from the animated universe.
And like I'm saying,
get Bruce Timm or Paul Dini in.
Paul Dini would have been, if they had Paul Dini write these movies, we would have had a much better film.
Mask of the Phantasms was one of my favorite DC movies ever. Yeah, I've been Mask of the Phantasms.
And that's where it's my hope is that they can break free in the same way that Marvel did. You know, Marvel breaks free and starts, and sure, they're owned by Disney now, whatever, but they are enabled to make they're empowered to make their
they didn't have their top tier people. Essentially, they didn't have X-Men, they didn't have Spider-Man. What are we left with? Let's do something with this, and they did. And
Marvel had their hands tied in the future.
Yeah, and I think with the future, as far as DC goes, I think they are definitely shifting gears, trying not to do the shared universe thing. So now they're like focused on like, let's do a Wonder Woman movie, even though it wasn't good. Let's do a Shazam movie that was, I think, great. And let's do
Robert Pattinson's Batman.
Let's do a weird take on the Joker that was whatever. Like it's fine, but you know, like let's do that instead of doing these like we have to do exactly what Marvel's doing. Let's just take the characters that we have and make Elseworld stories that people are going to go want to see anyway. And if we decide to go back to Justice League, we'll go back to Justice League maybe down the road, but maybe we do what, you know, Charlie suggests, like let's start at Justice League where it starts here and then goes other places
out and just throw you in the middle of it. Okay, so I have a quick question. I've like, by the time we finish these, I always get anal about like, I just have like 2 more notes. I have a question. We have that moment with Lex Luthor sitting in the ship and in the beginning, right? Because like I did think that was interesting. I thought that starting this with the death of Superman and showing that it was like, you know, he's like he, I guess, activated the mother boxes or whatever. But anyways, like all these people are hearing the death cry of Superman, which was kind of cool. And one of those people is Lex Luthor, which I thought it was kind of ridiculous that Lex Luthor turns and he does this. He's like, he literally nods. And he's like, thank you, Doomsday.
Nice.
Yeah, like.
But before you get to your point, I think that
dead, but
before you get to your point, though, hold on. Before you get to your point, I just want to say one thing about that shot is that this whole movie is like we do all these crazy effects stuff, and it's like we went back and reanimated Steppenwolf, and he looks fantastic, and all this stuff, and they did all this, but like no one bothered to be like, hey, maybe we should have fixed the effects of like Luthor in the pool and make it not look like he's just kind of floating there, like. He doesn't even look like he's in the water.
The water.
Yeah. He's just kind of like, oh, we just kind of propped him, masked him in there, and he's in the water, you know. Sorry.
But so he's standing there, and you have Steppenwolf and the 3 mother boxes. So like my question to you guys is, what the fuck?
I think Lex should have been a little bit more involved with,
but
like,
assisting.
Like,
what was this?
But,
like
okay, so I'll answer it.
In a deleted scene of Batman v Superman,
yes, there is a deleted scene of Batman. So the idea, if you watch,
did he call Step? Like what? How does all of this equate to sparking this off?
Are you talking about as far as the Steppenwolf and the 3 mother boxes in the Kryptonian ship, or are you just talking about like how does that all interconnect in general?
He resurrects
He's in the pool
General Zod or whatever.
and makes him into Doomsday. He creates the Doomsday monster.
How does that then activate these mother boxes?
It doesn't. So the idea was that, like, yeah, Superman, and it establishes it in the movie in this weird, as you have been saying many times, this ham-fisted way of like saying, oh, the dark side in them, the Apocalyptians, which is what they're called in the comics, are like they're afraid of the Kryptonians because they know they're badass, like ass kickers, and like we could lose because of a Kryptonian. They suggested like if we bring him back, they're going to be upset. Like we know that we've had these mother boxes forever, and they woke up to fix Cyborg. So Superman must be the key to why they show up now. Is that now that he's dead, then they're going to come and take over because the guy has that line where he's like, "There's no lanterns, no Kryptonian, whatever." So in the Batman v Superman Ultimate Cut, he at the very end of it, it's like there's that tease where he's in the pool, and then we don't know what happened because like the SWAT team comes and then they see him there, and then like there's Steppenwolf and the mother boxes, and then it disappears, and you're just left to like what?
And you're like, what?
And then later Batman comes back to Arkham and he's like talking to Luthor, and Luthor's like the bells have rung, and he's saying all this really, trying to be profound, weird stuff that he's saying, but what he's getting the point out.
Gods and devils.
But what he's getting to the point is essentially because Superman's dead now, that Steppenwolf and Darkseid are going to come and take over the planet, whatever. And for some reason, they kind of established
Lex Luthor wouldn't.
They kind of established that
does he want that though? Like, why does Lex Luthor?
I don't know if he wants it. If it's more of like a
Superman dead, he doesn't want to destroy the world.
I know, but I don't know if it's that.
I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was intentional. I think he didn't realize like what he had done kind of had this repercussion of it. He was just trying to kill Superman.
So my question is two things.
They don't explain it.
What did
Movie's
Lex
bad. They
Luthor
explain
want? So it's two questions. What did Lex Luthor want, and why? And like, how did his actions bring about Steppenwolf? Because clearly there's a connection between him sitting in that pool, seeing Steppenwolf, and Steppenwolf showing up, like activating the mother boxes.
I guess the logic is the death of Superman is what made the boxes reactivate again. Because
what are you trying to figure out with Luthor though? I'm trying to figure out how to answer.
Did he want this? Was his intention to activate the mother boxes and call forth Steppenwolf?
I wouldn't say
or
no.
Was that just an accident? And then part two is, then how did these things bring those two things about? How did his actions bring those two things about?
His actions brought those things about because he killing Superman, then Darkseid, the mother boxes wook up or whatever, and it signaled to them.
Why?
I don't know, Charlie. It's a movie.
Because
the script said so.
Superman only showed up. Like, what about when Superman never existed on the planet in the first place? Shouldn't the mother boxes have just woken up like 100 years ago? Like during World War One, like they just, when Wonder Woman was doing her thing, the mother boxes just opened up. Like, what activated them in the first place?
Yeah.
Because clearly there's supposed to be a connection between Steppenwolf being in that pool and then Steppenwolf just suddenly showing up. Like, Lex Luthor's actions clearly brought it about. My whole thing is,
there's no clarity there as to why,
Yeah, we don't know why. We don't have all the answers to that.
I'm Zack Snyder and it's badass. Did you see his armor plating? He looks badass. As opposed to, wait. How is clearly there's supposed to be like, these are the consequences of somebody's actions or a decision made. But what was that? Superman crying out in pain because he's dying activated the mother boxes, but when he wasn't around in the first place, they weren't activated. Like, it's stupid. These movies are stupid. These movies suck. They're bad fucking movies.
All right, and that's the end. Goodbye.
Theatrical is better than this fucking BS Snyder Cut business. And every fanboy out there is like, but I wanted it. No. As badly as you want these movies to be profound, like the Dark Knight series was, we just have more Joel Schumacher comic booky and crap. That's what these are. And if you enjoy that, that's fine. And on a certain level, I can enjoy it. But everybody wants to pretend that Chris Nolan made these movies and that they're better than they are and they have something to say. These movies have nothing to say, and that's why I prefer the original cut, which is just shamelessly stupid, entertaining popcorn crap, as opposed to something trying to fuck you in the ass with philosophy and, oh, I read an Ayn Rand book one time. Asshole. Anyway, to be anal, that was a pretty good send off. But to be anal, I did think that the Amazon women, literally making the whole whatever building they were in collapse into the ocean, that was badass. Like in pure Snyder fashion, that was badass.
Also, for the big secret room, they're gonna hide the cube that they don't want anyone to get to. Why is there a big fucking hole in the ceiling? Close the gates. Why? We can just jump out the hole.
Our ancient like Greek style architecture. That was like the only way we could get light in here, other than fire. It's hilarious. And then in like subtle differences between Snyder and Whedon, the a kind of a misstep, but like again a necessary misstep with Whedon was the whole that the janitor that was like, hey, Professor Stone or Dr. Stone, I was really sorry about that lab accident that killed your son. And like, remember that lab accident that we all know about? But like, I'm running into you in the hallway. Like, sorry about that lab accident. You know, like just get the exposition in there somehow, you know, and then instead we have the whole thing with the football or the them crashing the car and all that. And like, that's all well and good. But like, Whedon's like trying to cut this thing down. But then on the flip side, like a good example of him doing his job was the Lois moment, like Lois Lane coming in and saving the day when Superman's going berserk is significantly stronger with Whedon, where it's like, all right, Alfred, like release or whatever, like release the big guns, and they pull her out. Like that's Whedon understanding the characters and understanding what would be effective. Whereas with the Snyder cut, we like, have
she's just conveniently there.
Scene of her walk, conveniently, like she's just walking around every day. I guess she goes to the his memorial because she's like she isn't over him, but like we have shot after shot of her just like staring into the mirror and like rubbing water on her face and like being depressed, and it's just
a baby test in the drawer. There's a pregnancy test.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to Whedon rubs two brain cells together and just goes, how would you defeat Superman? You would pull out the big guns, and the big guns would be Lois Lane. And he came in and just managed to he did a fantastic job of Frankensteining this weird bitch together and cutting the movie in half as far as running time was concerned. And it's not perfect, but I don't fucking hate it. The Snyder cut, Batman v Superman, I passionately hate those movies for being stupid crap. And
I'm pretty sure your hatred of these movies has increased since we've been talking.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, McCurdy, did you say you concede to this standing?
Yeah, I would have said that an hour ago, but
I just had to get the angst out, dude. The only catharsis I get is not from watching these movies. The catharsis comes from endlessly talking about my feelings, and then pouring beer down my throat.
But do you have faith, though? That's the important question. Do you have faith now?
Yes, I do. In a Snyderin? How would you
Snyderism?
Snyderin.
I don't think he deserves that.
What?
Does that make you feel better? He doesn't deserve a Kubrickian or a Spielbergian. You know, he doesn't get one.
That's what
he doesn't get that.
Snyderian. Yeah.
He doesn't get one of those.
So
anyway,
I doubt anybody's watching at this point. Kevin Arnold sent us a bunch of shit emojis, and then he said maybe there were lanterns, but they died. So then there were neither, and I don't know what the hell he's talking about. But his timestamp says he sent that at 11:12 p.m. and I'm going, whoa, I don't have a clock in front of me, so we've probably been going
3 hours.
Too long.
We are at 3 hours. I don't understand. What are you looking at? Are you looking at the YouTube or are you looking at the StreamYard?
I'm only looking at StreamYard.
It literally has a clock that says live, and then it says the time.
Yeah, but I blocked it because I didn't want to see it. I want to be distracted. I wanted to just talk. And
if we go for another hour, we'll be just as long as Snyder Cut.
Honestly, I was hoping for that. Like I really wanted that. And then somebody could be like, no, your review of it was as long as the movie. And then
at least we didn't use slow motion.
Shit emojis. Yeah.
And then some slow motions of Charlie getting angry.
Yeah, I'll slow all of this down. Every time I gesticulate a lot, I'll slow it down. And then people will be like, wow, it's profound. Did you see? It was slow-mo and it had music behind it. And it used words like faith and God. It must be profound.
Do some big needle drops of songs just randomly in it.
Yeah. I just want to know. I honestly just want to know what Chris Nolan thinks of these. Is he just too busy counting money to give a shit? Like, he's like, I made my 3 movies.
I think, honestly, he just didn't give a shit. I don't think he gave a shit after he was done with Man of Steel. Like,
I think he cared when he did Man of Steel, and I think after
they
that,
made Man of Steel, I think he was just like, look, I made my movies.
Nolan's not a comic book nerd. He doesn't care about the comic. He
really. I think he is.
No.
I think
beyond
he
Batman,
is.
though? Beyond Batman?
I think he still likes the superhero stuff, but I don't think he's... I mean, yeah, I think he cares about the Batman stuff, considering that some of the stuff that is in Batman Begins is deep dive shit, and also that in one of his very first movies, the bat symbol is obviously on his door, because that's his apartment that they used in the movie. I think he's a Batman fan. I think he actually really liked the Batman comics. Not necessarily like the other stuff. I don't know.
Clearly,
I don't know, but what I'm saying is, I'm like,
beyond that. Like, does he care about Superman?
I don't know.
Care about the Martian?
But here's the other thing you gotta realize is that
because they want him to.
The other thing you have to realize is that, like, overseas in Britain, like the way that we view Batman over here, like we're like, yeah, Batman's the best. In Britain, like they like Superman more for some weird reason, and so it makes me wonder. It's like, well, maybe he grew up in a Superman household or just like Batman. I don't know, but I'm just also kind of like, I do think he's probably a nerd, but I think he probably likes film more and likes, you know, Honor Majesty's Secret Service and Stanley Kubrick movies and all that stuff, probably more than he just likes Batman, you know.
He says he has a soft spot for Tokyo Drift.
And that movie. Yeah.
Are you joking or is that real?
No, that's serious. There's a real, like, interview with somewhere. He's like, no, like he's like, I don't watch all these like artsy films. I like to watch.
I wonder if you know, Tokyo. If you think it, then you mean it, then you know you have to go. Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious. Oh wait, guys, it's late enough to start doing karaoke. Do you guys want to go for another hour doing karaoke?
Oh, God.
No, God, you're drunk. Like I can't.
You guys are the only ones with kids. You guys shouldn't even be here in the first place. So
it's not just kids. I have to get up in the morning and go to work. So
you said you said you wanted to wrap up at an hour ago. So
yeah, because we could have, but you had to keep your points in there, and I'm like, you made your point, Bo.
My dog is next door. That's the only baby I have, and I'll go get her.
Your dog don't matter.
Okay, all in all. We have come to the conclusion. I mean, I don't know if it's a 2 versus 1 or if it's unanimous. Is it unanimous that we're? I mean,
at this point,
the
the new ranked philosophy is just keep going as long as you can until someone's just like, "Can we just stop?" Can you shut up? I want to go home.
Hey, the war of attrition that
it's
this
literally
podcast
the show
has
should be
become.
called the filibuster podcast.
Yeah, you're filibuster.
Because that's what it's fucking become, and I'm so tired of it. I don't want to hear. If I ever hear the argument again, I don't care about the stuff that happened before. Let's talk about the movie. I'm like, shut up,
dude. The
shut
filibuster
up.
Oh,
I don't want to hear it. But here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say, I don't care. I don't care. I think you make some very valid points, but I do think at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to like your personal preference if you're going to like this movie or not. Like it's like for the reasons I enjoyed the Snyder Cut. I'm like, I kind of enjoyed it. I kind of liked it a little bit more. Things I didn't like about the Whedon Cut. I'm like, there's some comedic things that I'm like, I know why he did it, and like you made some really great points. Is like Whedon understands the characters, and I perfectly knew that going in. That's probably what we're gonna see a difference between these two movies. But there's stuff in the Whedon Cut that I'm like, even though it's Frankenstein and he does fix some story beat things that probably make the thing more streamlined, there's some stuff with Batman and some of the humor that I'm like, it's a little overboard. Like, take that joke out. We don't need that joke. Things like that. But I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care. I could be like, I could interchange these movies. It doesn't make a huge impact. For me, it was like, I like the fact that we got two cuts because you can see it's almost like a thought experiment. You can see two different versions of the same movie. And I thought that was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, yeah, I agree that overall, like, somebody will make a fun fan edit between these two and maybe make something that's even better than the two of them solo.
Maybe.
Right? I mean, again, my whole point is that overall, it's like the whole thing with fans is like, well, you just wait and see. If they were to release the Snyder Cut, it would be awesome, man. It would be like the best movie ever. And then the Snyder Cut comes out and it's partially true, but then it's also like, but maybe Zack Snyder isn't like the Jesus Christ figure that you think he is. Maybe he's not the best filmmaker. I know Kevin Arnold is already sending me a letter bomb. He's already threatened my life.
Oh, I know. But Kevin,
he's sending me shit emojis. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like he's the best filmmaker ever. And it's like, I love Zack Snyder of 300. I honestly really love Watchmen. But then other than that and Dawn of the Dead, I like Zack Snyder was like my man back in the day.
But like
as
Michael
he goes on and then he more and more like Michael Bay, where it's like he's trying so hard to be deep and profound, and he just keeps making
you know what it reminds me of though? You know what this reminds me of more
angsty, because I'm cutting myself. It must be dramatic.
What it reminds me more about is just there are some filmmakers that they make one really great movie and then they keep making movies. And it's like they're trying to go back, but it's like everything they really wanted to say that was so profound and people really liked was in that one movie. I think this is a lot like Christopher Nolan, in my opinion, right? Christopher Nolan, he kind of went up the ladder and started making these really good movies where they were kind of like this experiment with time and all this stuff. And he did Batman and everyone loved the Batman movies. Then he makes Inception, which to me, I think was the movie that he wanted to make for the longest time, which is true.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to his first movie, one of the characters is the same name, and it's kind of like also about his Cobb, and it's all about stealing stuff. So it's like you really wanted to make this Inception movie your entire life, but he makes that movie, and then after that movie comes out, every other movie that he does is slightly a misstep. Like not everybody was a fan of it, of Interstellar. Not everybody. I know you do not like Dunkirk. Like there's a lot of his
Dunkirk is to me.
I opened Pandora's box.
Dunkirk and Revenant came out at the same time, and I had this same exact feeling about both, which is like, these might be the best movies ever, and then they come out and they both suck, and everybody's in denial. Like, no, Dunkirk. Like, I've had people threaten my life because I think Dunkirk sucks, but I took just to plug myself real quick. One of these days, I'll have a little overlay that'll be about Film Hacker, but I make fan edits. And one of my probably my favorite fan edit is I took Dunkirk, which I think sucks, and I cut it. I was I was the first person to do this, even though other people replicated me soon after. I took Dunkirk and I cut it with The Darkest Hour because I saw Darkest Hour in theaters and I went, holy shit, if I combine these two, I could salvage Dunkirk, because Dunkirk's problem was just like, it was as if Christopher Nolan was like, I'm done with heroism. I'm going to do something where it's like, maybe heroism isn't that great. And then, but it turns out that like, when you don't romanticize war, nobody gives a shit. Unless you, the only people who like Dunkirk are people who like were just Christopher Nolan fanboys. Like, in the same way that Zack Snyder can do no wrong, Chris Nolan can do no wrong. Dunkirk's the best movie ever. Really?
Yeah.
Do you want to put that movie in right now and watch it, or is that movie just bland and it's just like it lacks any and all romanticism, as opposed to Darkest Hour had that. It only didn't have any action. So coincidentally, when you combine those two movies together, they make for one badass kick-ass movie that has an emotional core in the form of Winston Churchill, and it has those action scenes. But anyway, sorry.
So yeah,
side tangent.
But to that point, it's like you have filmmakers who, I think, when you boil that, what I'm trying to get down to, it's essentially every filmmaker has their own devices, whatever they do, and sometimes those devices make for really great movies. Zack Snyder likes to do slow-mo. Michael Bay has really cool camera shots and explosions. You know, Steven Spielberg, you know, he's got his own little tropes of things. Christopher Nolan does a lot of cool stuff with time in his stories or whatever. But when it's like, hey, we can't do, when you give somebody the keys and say, here, do whatever you want. You made a great movie. Here's everything. Here's all the money. And they've seen this in Hollywood. This is true in Hollywood history. This happened with like Gates of Heaven, right? Like this was the end of the auteur 70s era. Heaven's Gate. Thank you. So Heaven's Gate, it was like this movie where they just threw money at this filmmaker. And then what happened? The movie came out and it was a bomb. It was a beautiful movie, but it was a bomb. And it was mainly, I think it's just, you give somebody who has talent, let them, without giving them any kind of creative hurdles, it makes them lazy, and then they start doing the same crap that they just know that they do and on autopilot, and then you get bad movies. Like George Lucas is the same way. George Lucas made a amazing like movie that everyone to this day still talks about. Like it was like, oh yeah, I just watched that yesterday. Everyone still talks about Star Wars. Everyone still talks about Empire and Return of the Jedi. But when you talk about the first Star Wars and you hear about the stories behind it, it was like he had his hands tied behind his back making that movie. He had these weird ideas, but he had to come up with creative decisions to make a better movie. And that's what we got. That's how we got Star Wars, is because he had to do all these weird things to get the movie to work. And they worked. And he had great people behind him. And it's really funny because like we go back to Zack Snyder, and ironically, talking about the Fountainhead and how like you have a guy who has his own vision, and he's like, I'm going to make this monument, and it is going to be a perfect building, and I will not compromise on anybody else's decisions. And you see, and like from Charlie, from your point of view, you see that, and you're like, here's all the money, here's everything, here's you can do your vision, we're not going to meddle. And we get the Snyder cut, and you're like, great, this is a piece of shit. You know, like all that build up, you're like, great. I've lent you all your devices. You couldn't come up with anything creative. There's no boundaries. We did not give you any boundaries. Show that there's no
perfect solution. It's not like as some people be like, oh, this art through committee is terrible. We need a one person's singular vision. But then, what if that person's singular vision is crap? And that's where it's like, anytime anybody thinks they have a simple solution to a complex problem, they immediately get shit all over their face. And that's where it's just like, you know, because you'd be like, well, they should have gotten Kevin Feige to do it. Maybe Kevin Feige comes to do DC and it doesn't work for XYZ reason. Like there's never a simple solution. And the last thing I ever want to be is like the armchair quarterback who's like, well, if I did it, I would have, you know, like I'll always throw out like fixes I have and all that. But like, I also realize that there are no, like, this is all a complicated machine. Like I've made a feature film it sucked. It's like the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's terrible.
And but
it leads me to understanding the process to the point where I can at least comment on decisions other people make. And what it comes down to is Zack Snyder just wasn't the choice to lead this up.
No,
and we have the proof, because we finally have this Snyder cut that everybody BS'd about for months. Like, well, you wait and see. When they release the Snyder cut, it's going to be a masterpiece. And as we've decided, it's not as good as the theatrical. Both suck. Both are garbage, but not. But Zack Snyder didn't come in as like our savior, right? Our Superman.
Yeah. I also, this is getting corny and poetic, but I think creatives should have limitations, but they also should have peers. They should be, dare I say it, united to be able to come up with other people. Let me slow this down to make it more emotional. Let's add slow motion.
Let me be like
music.
Victor Stone's mom. That's my baby. That's my baby.
But in reality, I do think that...
ma'am, he only scored a single touchdown. That's my baby. He cheats on his grades. He cheats on his grades.
Another way of saying it is like when you don't have other people, when you don't have other people to kind of, sharpen the edges, so to speak, or, smooth out the rough spots. When you don't have other people that do that,
collaboration goes a long
You get
way.
people, you get things like the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've gone on.
We've
bullshitted long enough. Probably too long. But these are fun. I will say that normally I would then take everything that we've said and I would go spend a week. That's right, a week editing and cutting in footage and all that. But just doing these raw and unedited is also a lot of fun. Any final thoughts between the two of you, gentlemen?
I like this Whedon cut more, but I appreciate the Snyder cut as someone who's like more of a DC. I like the world and like fan service part. Like I love all the New God stuff and from like the shows and comics. So I was happy to actually see an actual dark side. So that's why I appreciate that side of stuff. But I'll watch Justice League, the theatrical one, more when I want to not think and just sit and watch dumb action stuff.
I think I would just quickly reiterate my thought on like, I wish the Snyder cut was a masterpiece. Like again, as like a Peter Jackson fanboy that just loves like, oh, Peter Jackson has the Peter Jackson cut. I'm there for it. I love it. But it just didn't save this IP. It just didn't save the Justice League. And I would rather watch it and enjoy it than watch the Snyder cut and passionately hate it the same way I passionately hated Batman v Superman. Like just with a passion. I would just obsess over how much I hated it. And then I saw Justice League and I walked out of the theater like, I don't feel hatred in my heart. I can sleep tonight. And that's how I come to my conclusion. And McCurdy's yawning. Yeah.
Great.
That's his thought about Snyder Cut. That's exactly what the thought is.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything profound to end this broadcast on? Oh, we have a new comment, just real quick. I want to hang out with Kevin. Can we bring Kevin on the next sure. What are we calling this? Not mini ranked, ranked one-off. All he said was #cancel Charlie.
Oh my gosh.
We gonna be best friends, Kevin. You asshole. Okay, anyway, so without if nobody has anything smart to cap this off, I'm just gonna click this button.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on again. I haven't seen you guys in a while, so
Yeah,
it's good having
in
you
case
on, Jeff.
anybody knew, Jeff was on the Dr. No episode of Bond, and then I don't know, he found Jesus or something, and
I found faith.
Yeah, he found faith. he watched Batman v Superman, and then he watched Justice League, and he found faith. No, the Snyder Cut. It was in the Snyder Cut that he had faith. But anyway, all in favor of ending this broadcast? Okay.